Leader of the House is known for his courtesy, so I'm sure he will agree with me that language describing travellers as an invasion, a disease, contrasting them with decent people, or talking of them as a problem, all of which have been heard in this House in recent months, is deplorable. Will he arrange a debate, perhaps in Hate Crime Week after the recess, for us to discuss how we can use language respectfully towards everybody in this country?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Lady for her generous compliment. But it really is important that we use language properly, that language is effective and language is powerful. Mr. Speaker controls how it is used in this House to ensure that it is orderly, but the general tone should be one of generosity and kindliness, and I would always encourage that. In terms of a debate, I don't think one in government time is likely, but as I've said before, there are adjournment debates, backbench business debates, Westminster Hall debates, and it is a really important issue, and I would encourage and share the Honourable Lady's view that good manners goes a long way.
Andrew Salu.
I warmly congratulate my right honourable friend on his new appointment and say he's already looking like an old pro in the position. Could we have an urgent debate on serious deficiencies in the enforcement of minimum wage legislation? A carer in my constituency is owed £63,000 in unpaid minimum wage, despite the Care Act requiring Luton Borough Council to have an effective monitoring process of the personal budget payments involved. HMRC, as the enforcement agency, can take no action against the person cared for because she has no assets. How can my constituent get her unpaid minimum wage?
Mr. Speaker, that is a very serious issue. Regrettably, I can't comment on individual cases, but I'm clear that care workers provide essential support to some of the most vulnerable members of society, and it is essential that they are paid in accordance with the law, including the national minimum wage, for the work that they do. This is a responsibility of local authorities, who should ensure that personal budgets are sufficient to deliver a person's care needs, including making sure that it covers the cost of wages, and they have a duty to monitor how personal budgets are spent. But the Department of Health and Social Care will take this up with the local authority and ask them to investigate what sounds a very serious and concerning case.
Order. I'm keen to move on to the statement by the Prime Minister at or very close to 11:30, so the normal practice of accommodating everybody will not apply today. However, participation will be maximised by short questions and the Leader's characteristically pithy replies. Single-sentence inquiries are to be preferred. Peter Kyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Congratulations on the new job to the Leader of the House. He said already today that he will be the voice of this chamber and that he will hold the government to account. Can he therefore tell us, what does he feel about the appointment from the new Prime Minister of somebody who is his closest adviser who has been found in contempt of this House? What will he do to hold them to account for that decision, and what does he feel about it?
Mr. Speaker, Parliament did what it did. It passed its sentence. It didn't use its ancient powers to imprison or fine the gentleman concerned. It didn't send him to the clock tower. Therefore, effectively, his conviction is spent, and I believe in the rehabilitation of offenders.
Bob Seeley.
Speaker, I welcome the right honourable gentleman to his new role. Ministers made a holding statement on the telecom supply chain review this week. Huawei and Chinese high-tech was not part of that, or no announcement was made. Due to the seriousness of this issue, will he consider a debate in government time so that government outlines options on the role of Chinese high-tech in our critical national infrastructure? Apart from Brexit, this is one of the most serious issues that we will face in the 21st century, and would you agree we need more debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's obviously an important issue, but the means of obtaining a debate are well known. I did express views on this before I was bound by collective responsibility, but currently I am waiting for the government's review.
Jim Cunningham.
Mr. Speaker, coming back to the honourable gentleman's question on taxi regulations, the Leader of the House never answered the question. When is he going to bring those proposals? The Minister responsible going to bring those proposals to the House? Because the Minister told us it was only a matter of parliamentary time. Will he find the time?
Well, the honourable gentleman knows that there are usual channels for finding time, and that ministers ask for time for things to come forward, and that these things have to slot in with the overall parliamentary timetable. But the commitment has been made, and the commitment will be honoured.
Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I also welcome my right honourable friend to his new role. I know his predecessor was looking at the online harassment that sometimes politicians face, especially women and those from certain ethnic groups, and was planning to engage with counterparts from other parliaments across the world to see how they had addressed this issue in order to stop putting people off standing for Parliament. Can I urge him to continue with this important work?
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for raising that important issue. It is something that should distress us all, that online harassment seems to affect a certain category of society more than others. It seems to affect women and ethnic minorities more than men. And it would be absolutely appalling if this deterred good people from coming into political life. I'm extremely keen that the suggestion she made be looked at and that we try and work out how to lessen this problem, because it's something we should all be worried about.
Chris Leslie.
I wonder if the new Leader of the House will say a little more now about how he intends to champion the supremacy of the House of Commons, because we've slipped into some very bad habits recently: Opposition Day motions not being fulfilled by the government, other resolutions being ignored by the executive. Does he believe that if this House of Commons resolves something, that he will ensure those resolutions are faithfully executed?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable gentleman has a view of history that is longer than mine. He says recently. I don't think 1972 is that recent, but it was then that this House abrogated parliamentary sovereignty and decided to hand it over to what then became the European Union. I'm glad to say we've taken back control and that Parliament will be sovereign once again, but Parliament is sovereign by law, not by mere motion. The last time it was sovereign by mere motion was when it issued ordinances under Oliver Cromwell. Do I wish to go back to that, Mr. Speaker? No, sir.
Henry Smith.
Mr. Speaker, and I warmly congratulate my honourable friend on his appointment. I also very much welcomed yesterday on the steps of Downing Street the new Prime Minister talking about investment in primary care. In Crawley, too many GP surgeries are at or over capacity. Can we have an early statement on that issue?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for his kind words. He's absolutely right to raise this issue. We all know that GP practices provide a vital service to our local communities. We will continue to build on the recent changes to GP services and primary care, as set out earlier this year in the NHS long-term plan, including an extra £4.5 billion for primary care and community services and up to 20,000 additional staff working in general practice over the next 20 years. And I'm sure the Health Secretary will report back, which I hope will meet his demand for a debate.
Newlands.
Mr. Speaker, as we've heard, the Leader is supposed to be the great defender of Parliament and parliamentary democracy, but in January he said that if the House of Commons undermines our basic constitutional convention, then the Executive is entitled to use other vestigial constitutional means to stop it, by which I basically mean prorogation. So is the Leader going to be Parliament's man in Cabinet or Cabinet's man in Parliament?
Mr. Speaker, you and I know perfectly well that this constitution of ours, this precious vessel of our constitution, is bound by conventions, and it is overwhelmingly important that all the conventions are followed and obeyed. These are conventions about how this House operates, how the other place operates, and how the executive operates. These are grown up over time from our history and our understanding of how we should be governed, and it is very risky to break one convention, because that then leads to other conventions being taken less seriously.
Marcus Jones.
I welcome my honourable friend to his new position. Private building inspectors are a vital part of the construction industry. Through no fault of their own, many of these building inspectors are now having a massive issue in terms of renewing professional indemnity insurance. Can the government provide a statement confirming what it can do to support the reform of this important insurance?
I'm well aware of the issue. It is an important one, and I will pass it on to the relevant minister.
Jenny Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The powers to stop and search young people is viewed useful in reducing serious youth violence. Will the new Leader of the House agree to a debate on this in government time?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If only people would bait their breath momentarily. The new Prime Minister is going to make a statement shortly, and one of the things he has already been advocating is ensuring police have our support for stop and search. So there may be an opportunity to ask my right honourable friend in a moment.
Julian Knight.
Speaker, as we break for some restoration and renewal during recess, my constituents' lives are being blighted by two things. First of all, inconsiderate garden grabbing with no social purpose whatsoever, and the second, stealing of car parts to order. Can we have a debate, please, in government time on these twin menaces and how we reform the law to help my constituents?
Thank you. I think it's very important that we always stand up for and help our constituents. But the chairman of the Backbench Business Committee is still sitting here paying close attention to what is being said, and I'm sure his committee will consider my honourable friend's request.
Colleen Fletcher.
Mr. Speaker, I recently met with matrons at my local hospital in Coventry. We talked about a range of issues, including the government's disastrous decision to abolish NHS bursaries, which they said had resulted in a 32% drop in applications to study nursing, thereby exacerbating the workforce crisis in our NHS, where we already have 41,000 nursing vacancies. Will the Leader of the House look for time to debate the problem of recruitment and retention in our nursing profession and the need to introduce the NHS bursary to help address...
Mr. Speaker, the relevant Secretary of State has whispered in my ear, and I feel it should have a wider audience, that we have record numbers of nurses and record numbers in training. So this is a significant success of this government, and if we wish to have a debate on the successes and triumphs of this government, I would be all in favour.
Chris Green.
Mr. Speaker, would my honourable friend provide government time for a debate on the future of the Northern Powerhouse? Because we need to deliver on the vision, unite the talents across the North, defeat the poverty of Labour's low aspiration. So will my honourable friend reinsert the all-important energy to the Northern Powerhouse?
This is an absolutely brilliant point, Mr. Speaker, and follows on from what I was saying. I think we should have days of debate of the wonderful successes of this government. £13 billion spent on the Northern Powerhouse, the Minister for the Northern Powerhouse now attending the Cabinet, triumph after triumph achieved by this government, and we've only had our new Prime Minister for 24 hours. It's absolutely amazing. But it's probably in the purview of the Backbench Business Committee.
Ian Paisley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I also congratulate the new Leader of the House, who appears to be very well fitted to the role. Can I ask the Leader of the House that I'm very disappointed that in the first week back we do not have business with regards to a draft historical bill on abuse for Northern Ireland. Will that be on the second week when we're back, as indicated by the Northern Ireland Secretary?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend really should be aware that there will be Northern Ireland questions on the 11th. He can raise this with the relevant minister, but I accept it's a really important issue.
Jeremy Lefroy.
Could we have a debate on the importance of a commitment from both the UK and the EU to the continuation of allowing musicians and artists to work without hindrance in each other's territories?
Mr. Speaker, this is obviously of importance, that we want to be able to ensure that cultural exchanges continue, and I'm sure that this will be something that will be achieved by the government.
Helen Goodman.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to congratulate the Leader of the House, with whom I've spent many happy hours in the Procedure Committee, where he championed the rights of this House. He perambulated around the question about prorogation. So, to be absolutely specific, can he confirm that the House will be sitting each week, every week, between the 8th of October and the 31st?
Mr. Speaker, we've got perambulators and nannies into this session, which I think must be a first for Leader of the House's questions. The issue of prorogation is one that my right honourable friend has said is an archaic usage, but there will have to be a prorogation before there is a new session. This is the routine constitutional position, and I believe in maintaining the constitutional conventions.
One sentence. Bob Blackman.
Transport for London are currently consulting on building high-density multi-storey housing on car parks at stations across London. Can we have a debate in government time on the impact on commuters right across the whole of South East England?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I understand that my honourable friend is likely to be called in the adjournment debate later. It will be a golden opportunity to raise this subject.
Cass Smith.
Speaker, I do hope that recent kipper waving isn't a red herring. And can I ask the Leader of the
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I didn't hear a word.
Let's hear it again. Cat Smith.
I do hope that recent kipper waving has not been a red herring. And can I ask when we can expect to see the fisheries bill back in this place?
Thank you very much. Those kippers, I can assure the Honourable Lady, were absolutely delicious. They were eaten by my right honourable friend with gusto, and shows his characteristic support for the British fishing industry. But the Honourable Lady knows that bills come back through the normal channels, through the normal courses, and all things will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of things will be well.
Gusto eating is a challenge to even the most vivid imagination, but we will reflect upon that, I feel sure. Steve Double.
Earlier this week, a group of local authorities representing rural areas formed a coalition under the title Britain's Leading Edge. Many of these areas have benefited from European funding. Once we leave the EU, will the government continue its commitment to invest in these areas through the Shared Prosperity Fund?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It is, of course, our money in the first place, which is recycled. My right honourable friend, the Chancellor, has whispered in my SPF. So, yes, the money is there.
Yes, Snell.
When will the House have a chance to vote on their Lordship's amendment to the trade bill for participation in a customs union?
Why on earth would anybody want to do that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the honourable gentleman to his place. Will he join me in congratulating the team at Sainsbury's in Kinross for getting the Perth and Kinross Gold Stars for equality at work? And will he provide some government time to discuss the disability, confident and access to work programmes?
I extend my warmest good wishes to the Sainsbury's in Kinross for their brilliant achievement. I think it might be a slightly niche subject for debate on the chamber floor of the House of Commons, however.
Diana Johnson.
With antisocial behaviour and crime rising steeply since 2010, and in the first half of July, 23 emergency service workers were assaulted in Hull. I was very pleased to hear that the Prime Minister announced last night 20,000 new police officers. Can we have a debate on when those police officers are actually going to be on the streets, where they're going to be in the country, and whether they will be equally shared around?
Mr. Speaker, may I wish the Honourable Lady a very many happy returns of the day. I understand it is an auspicious day today. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, is going to be making a statement. He has clearly made the extra 20,000 police an absolute priority. We need to ensure that everything is done to combat crime and to ensure that people in Hull and everywhere else in the country are safe. But it may be sensible to ask my right honourable friend later.
Order. We must now move on, but in thanking the new Leader of the House, I note that there will be many opportunities to question him about future business in the weeks and months ahead. Order. Statement, the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, with permission, I shall make a statement on the mission of this new Conservative government. But before I begin, I'm sure the whole House will join me in paying tribute to my right honourable friend, the member for Maidenhead, for all she has given to the service of our nation. From fighting modern slavery to tackling the problems of mental ill health, she has a great legacy on which we shall all be proud to build. And our mission is to deliver Brexit on the 31st of October for the purpose of uniting and re-energising our great United Kingdom and making this country the greatest place on earth. And when I say the greatest place on earth, I'm conscious that some may accuse me of hyperbole. But it is useful to imagine the trajectory on which we could now be embarked. By 2050, it is more than possible that the United Kingdom will be the greatest and most prosperous economy in Europe, at the centre of a new network of trade deals, which we have pioneered with the road and rail investments we are making and propose to make now, the investment in broadband and 5G. Our country will boast the most formidable transport and technological connectivity on the planet by unleashing the productive power of the whole United Kingdom, not just of London and the South East, but of every corner of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. We will have closed forever the productivity gap and seen to it that no town is left behind ever again, no community ever forgotten. Our children and grandchildren will be living longer, happier and healthier lives. And our kingdom in 2050, thanks, by the way, to the initiative of the previous Prime Minister, will no longer make any contribution whatsoever to the destruction of our precious planet brought about by carbon emissions, because we will have led the world in delivering that net zero target. We will be the home of electric vehicles, cars, even planes, powered by British-made battery technology, being developed right here, right now. We will have the free ports to revitalise our coastal communities, a bioscience sector liberated from anti-genetic modification rules, blight-resistant crops that will feed the world, and the satellite and Earth observation systems that are the envy of the world. We will be the seedbed for the most exciting and most dynamic business investments on the planet. Our constitutional...
Order, I apologise for interrupting the Prime Minister. There's far too much noise in this chamber. And far too many members who think it's all right for them to shout out their opinion at the Prime Minister. Well, let's be clear, it isn't. The statement will be heard and there will be ample opportunity, in conformity with convention and as established by me over the last decade, for colleagues to question the Prime Minister. But the statement will be heard, and it will be heard with courtesy. The Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, may I applaud your intervention, and I think there's also far too much negativity about the potential of our great country. I think you will agree, Mr. Speaker, because our constitutional settlement, our United Kingdom, will be firm and will be secure. Our union of nations beyond question. Our democracy robust. Our future clean, green, prosperous, united, confident and ambitious. And that is the prize, and that is our responsibility in this House of Commons to fulfil. And to do so, we must take some immediate steps. And the first is to restore trust in our democracy and fulfil the repeated promises of Parliament to the people by coming out of the European Union and doing so on October the 31st. I and all ministers are committed to leaving on this date, whatever the circumstances, and to do otherwise would cause a catastrophic loss of confidence in our political system. It would leave the British people wondering whether their politicians could ever be trusted again to follow a clear democratic instruction. I would prefer us to leave the EU with a deal. I would much prefer it. I believe that it is possible even at this late stage, and I will work flat out to make it happen. But certain things need to be clear. The withdrawal agreement negotiated by my predecessor has been 3 times rejected by this House. Its terms are unacceptable to this Parliament and to this country. No country that values its independence and indeed its self-respect could agree to a treaty which signed away our economic independence and self-government as this backstop does. A time limit is not enough. If an agreement is to be reached, it must be clearly understood that the way to the deal goes by way of the abolition of the backstop. For our part, we are ready to negotiate in good faith an alternative, with provisions to ensure that the Irish border issues are dealt with where they should always have been in the negotiations on the future agreement between the UK and the EU. I do not accept the argument that says these issues can only be solved by all or part of the UK remaining in the customs union or in the single market. The evidence is that other arrangements are perfectly possible and are also perfectly compatible with the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement, to which we are, of course, steadfastly committed. My team and my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, are ready to meet and talk on this basis to the Commission or other EU colleagues whenever, wherever they are ready to do so. And for our part, we will throw ourselves into these negotiations with the greatest energy and determination and in a spirit of friendship. And I hope that the EU will be equally ready and that they will rethink their current refusal to make any changes to the withdrawal agreement. If they do not, we will of course have to leave the UK without an agreement under Article 50. The UK is better prepared for that situation than many believe. But we are not as ready yet as we should be. In the 98 days that remain to us, we must turbocharge our preparations to make sure that there is as little disruption as possible to our national life. And I believe that that is possible with the kind of national effort that the British people have made before and will make again. And in these circumstances, we would, of course, have available the £39 billion in the withdrawal agreement to help deal with any consequences. I have today instructed the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster to make these preparations his top priority. I have asked the Cabinet Secretary to mobilise the civil service to deliver this outcome should it become necessary. And the Chancellor has confirmed that all necessary funding will be made available. I will also ensure, 4.2 billion has already been allocated, I will also ensure that preparing for leaving the EU without an agreement under Article 50 is not just about seeking to mitigate the challenges, but also about grasping the opportunities. This is not just about technical preparations, vital though they are. It is about having a clear economic strategy for the UK in all scenarios, something in which the Conservative Party has always led the way. And it's about producing policies which will boost the competitiveness and the productivity of our economy when we are free of EU regulations. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, we will begin right away on working to change the tax rules to provide extra incentives to invest in capital and research. We will now be accelerating the talks on those free trade deals, and we will prepare an economic package to boost British business and lengthen this country's lead, which seems so bitterly resented by the benches opposite. Lengthen this country's lead as the #1 destination in this continent for overseas investment, a status that is made possible at least partly by the diversity, the talent and the skills of our workforce. And Mr. Speaker, I also want therefore to repeat unequivocally our guarantee to the 3.2 million EU nationals now living and working among us. I thank them for their contribution to our society and for their patience, and I can assure them that under this government they will have the absolute certainty of the right to live and remain. Mr. Speaker, I want to end by making clear my absolute commitment to the 31st October date for our exit. Our national participation in the European Union is coming to an end, and that reality needs to be recognised by all parties. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, today there are very many brilliant officials, UK officials, trapped in meeting after meeting in Brussels and Luxembourg when they could be better deployed. They're deploying their talents in preparing to pioneer new free trade deals or promoting a truly global Britain. And I want to start unshackling our officials to undertake this new mission right away. So, we will not nominate a UK commissioner for the new Commission taking office on the 1st of December. Under no circumstances, though clearly this is not intended to stop the EU appointing a new Commission. Mr. Speaker, today is the first day of a new approach, which will end with our exit from the EU on the 31st of October. Then I hope we can have a friendly and constructive relationship as constitutional equals, as friends and partners in facing the challenges that lie ahead. I believe that is possible, and this government will work to make it so. But, Mr. Speaker, we are not going to wait until the 31st of October to begin building the broader and bolder future that I have described. We're going to start right away, providing vital funding vital funding for our frontline public services, to deliver better health care, better education and more police on the streets. Mr. Speaker, I am committed to making sure that the NHS receives the funds it deserves, receives the funds that were promised by the last government in June 2018, and these funds will go to the front line as soon as possible. This will include urgent funding for 20 hospital upgrades and winter readiness. I have asked officials to provide policy proposals for drastically reducing waiting times and for GP appointments. To address the rising tide of violence rise of violent crime in our country, I have announced that there will be 20,000 extra police, keeping us safe over the next 3 years, and I have asked my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, to ensure that this is treated as an absolute priority. We will give greater powers resisted, by the way, by the party opposite, to the police to use stop and search to help tackle violent crime. I have also tasked officials to draw up proposals to ensure that in future those found guilty of the most serious sexual and violent offences are required to serve a custodial sentence that truly reflects the severity of their offence, and policy measures that will see a reduction in the number of prolific offenders. On education, I have listened to the concerns of so many colleagues around the House, and we will increase the minimum level of pupil funding in primary and secondary schools and return education funding to levels that began by the end of this Parliament. We are committed to levelling up across every nation and region of the UK, providing support to towns and cities and closing the opportunity gap in our society. We will announce investment in vital infrastructure, full fibre rollout, transport and housing that can improve the quality of people's life, fuel economic growth and provide opportunity. Finally, we will also ensure that we will continue to attract the best and brightest talent from around the world. No one believes more strongly than me in the benefits of migration to our country. But I am clear that our immigration system must change. For years, politicians have promised the public an Australian-style points-based system, and today I will actually deliver on those promises. I will ask the Migration Advisory Committee to conduct a review of that system as the first step in a radical rewriting of our immigration system. And I am convinced that we can produce a system that the British public can have confidence in. Mr. Speaker, over the past few years, too many people in this country feel that they have been told repeatedly and relentlessly what we cannot do. Since I was a child, I remember respectable authorities asserting that our time as a nation has passed, that we should be content with mediocrity and managed decline. And time and again, these are the skeptics and doubters, my friends. Time and again, by their powers to innovate and to adapt, the British people have showed the doubters wrong. And, Mr. Speaker, I believe that at this pivotal moment in our national story, we are going to prove the doubters wrong again, not just with positive thinking and a can-do attitude, important though they are, but with the help and encouragement of a government and a cabinet that is bursting with ideas, ready to create change, determined to implement the policies that we need to succeed as a nation. The greatest place to live, the greatest place to bring up a family, the greatest place to send your kids to school, the greatest place to set up a business or to invest, because we have the best transport and the cleanest environment and the best health care and the most compassionate approach to care of elderly people. That is the mission of the cabinet I have appointed, and that is the purpose of the government I am leading. And that is why I believe that if we bend our sinews to the task now, there is every chance that in 2050, and I fully intend to be around, though not necessarily in this job, we will be able to look back on this period, this extraordinary period, as the beginning of a new golden age for our United Kingdom. And I commend this future to the House just as much as I commend this statement, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the right honourable gentleman to his position, and I thank him for an advance copy of his statement. No one underestimates this country, but the country is deeply worried that the new Prime Minister overestimates himself. He inherits a country that's been held back by 9 years of austerity. That's hit children and young people the hardest. Their youth centres have closed, their school funding cut, college budgets slashed, and with the help of the Liberal Democrats, tuition fees have trebled. Their housing costs are higher than ever. Their jobs are lower paid. Opportunity and freedom have been taken away. Austerity was always a political choice, never an economic necessity.
Order. I indicated that people wouldn't shout down the Prime Minister. Precisely the same applies to the Leader of the Opposition. Don't try it. You're wasting your vocal cords, and above all, it won't work. The right honourable gentleman will be heard, and these exchanges will take as long as they will take, whatever other appointments people might have. The right honourable gentleman will be heard. Stop it. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. His predecessor promised to end austerity, but spectacularly failed to deliver. People do not trust his Prime Minister to make the right choices for the majority of people in this country, when he's also promising tax giveaways to the richest and big business, his own party's funders. So, can he now indicate when he will set out the detail of the exact funding settlement for our schools, our hard-pressed local authorities and police, so they can start planning now? We must also address the deep regional inequalities in this country. The Northern Powerhouse has been massively underpowered. The Midlands engine has not been fuelled. So will he match Labour's commitment to a $500 billion investment fund to rebalance this country through regional development banks and a national transformation fund? He has hastily thrown together a hard right cabinet, and I've just a couple of questions, Mr. Speaker, on those appointments. Given his first appointment is the Home Secretary, the first Home Secretary for a generation to support the death penalty, can the Prime Minister assure the House now that his government has no plans to try and bring back capital punishment to this country? And before appointing the new Education Secretary, was the Prime Minister given sight of the Huawei leak investigation by the Cabinet Secretary? I'm deeply alarmed to see no plan for Brexit. He was in the Cabinet that accepted the backstop and, of course, voted for it on the 30th of March this year. It would be welcome if he could set out what he finds so objectionable, having voted for it less than 4 months ago. Can he explain this flip-flopping? The House will have both a sense of déjà vu and of trepidation at a Prime Minister setting out rigid red lines and an artificial timetable. There is something eerily familiar about a Prime Minister marching off to Europe with demands to scrap the backstop. So how does the Prime Minister think he will succeed where his predecessor failed? However, I do welcome the Prime Minister's commitment to finally guarantee the rights of European Union citizens. It's a great shame that this offer has only been made now, more than 3 years after this party put that proposal before this House. Our friends, neighbours, family should never have been treated as bargaining chips, causing untold stress and worry to people that have worked so hard for this community, this country and the communities that we make up. If the Prime Minister continues to pursue a reckless no deal, does he accept that he would be directly flouting the expressed will of this Parliament? Industry, business and unions have been absolutely clear about the threat that it poses. No deal means no steel, no car industry, food prices dramatically rising and huge job losses. Make UK, representing much of manufacturing industry, says no deal would be the height of economic lunacy. Companies from Toyota to Asda have been clear about the dangers of no deal. Is the Prime Minister still guided by his business policy? Mr. Speaker, those recklessly advocating no deal won't be the ones who lose out. The wealthy elite that funds him and his party will not lose their jobs, see their living standards cut or face higher food bills. Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister has confidence in his plan once he's decided what it is, he should go back to the people with that plan. Labour will oppose any deal that fails to protect jobs. We will oppose any deal that fails to protect jobs, workers' rights or environmental protections. And if he has the confidence to put that decision back to the people, we would, in those circumstances, campaign to remain. Mr. Speaker, the office of Mr. Speaker.
It'll take as long as it takes. I've got plenty of time. I'm totally untroubled by these matters. Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, the office of Prime Minister requires integrity and honesty. So will he correct his claim that kipper exports from the Isle of Man to the UK are subject to EU regulations? Will he also acknowledge that the 39 billion is now 33 billion, due over 30 years, and has been legally committed to be paid by his predecessor? This is a phony threat about a fake pot of money made by the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we also face a climate emergency, so will he take the urgent actions necessary? Will he ban fracking? Would he back real ingenuity like the Swansea Bay tidal lagoon? Would he increase investment in carbon capture and storage? Will he back our solar industry and onshore wind, so devastated over the last 9 years? Will he set out a credible plan to reach net zero? Mr. Speaker, I note the climate change denying US President has already labelled him Britain's Trump and welcomed his commitment to work with Nigel Farage. Could Britain Trump take this opportunity to rule out once and for all that our NHS is not going to be part of any trade deal with President Trump and the USA? Will he make it clear that our National Health Service is not going to be sold to American healthcare companies? Mr. Speaker, people fear that far from wanting to take back control, the new Prime Minister would effectively make us a vassal state of Trump's America. Will he ask the new Foreign Secretary to prioritise the release of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe? And is he working with European partners to restore the Iran nuclear deal and de-escalate tensions in the Gulf? Mr. Speaker, the challenge to end austerity, tackle inequality, resolve Brexit and tackle the climate emergency are what will define the new Prime Minister. Instead, we have a hard-right cabinet staking everything on tax cuts for the few and a reckless race to the bottom Brexit. He says he has pluck, nerve and ambition. Our country does not need arm-waving bluster, but competence, seriousness, and after a decade of divisive policies for the few, to focus for once on the interests of the many.
Mr. Speaker, I struggle to discover a serious question in that, but I'll make one answer, one important point that is worth making, which is that under no circumstances will we agree to any deal, any free trade deal that put the NHS on the table. It is not for sale. And I would remind the right honourable gentleman that for 44 years of its 71 years of glorious existence, it is the NHS that has benefited from Conservative policies and Conservative government. That unless you support wealth creation, unless you believe in British business and British enterprise and British industry, you will not have the funds. Unless you have a strong economy, you will not be able to pay for a fantastic NHS, Mr. Speaker. And that is a lesson that the honourable gentleman, right honourable gentleman, simply doesn't get. And I struggled to see the country. I struggled to see the country he described in his description of the United Kingdom today, because the reality, Mr. Speaker, is that unemployment is, of course, down under the Conservatives to the lowest level since the 90s, and crime is actually down a third since 2010. We have record inward investment in this country, £1.3 trillion coming. That's fantastic new electric car factories.
Order! Mr. MacDonald, you really are at times a reckless delinquent. Calm yourself, man. I know you get very irate because you feel passionately, and I respect your passion, but I don't respect your delinquency. Calm yourself, man. Take some sort of soothing medicament and you'll feel better as a consequence. The Prime Minister.
They don't like it, but the truth is that there were more homes built in this country last year than in any year in the last 31 years bar one. Wages are now outperforming inflation for the first time in a decade. The living wage, a Conservative policy. Which I'm proud to say I championed in London and was then stolen by our wonderful Conservative government and put into a national policy. The living wage has expanded the incomes of those who receive it by £4,500 since 2010. That is a fantastic achievement, and it is a Conservative achievement. The right honourable gentleman asks about trust and who can you trust to run how on earth? And he asks about Iran. Mr. Speaker, a right honourable gentleman who has been paid by Press TV of Iran, who repeatedly sides with the mullahs of Tehran rather than our friends in the United States over what is happening in the Persian Gulf. How incredible that we should even think of entrusting that gentleman with the stewardship of this country's security. But worse than that, by far, Mr. Speaker, this is a right honourable gentleman who is set on an economic policy together with the shadow Chancellor, who was sacked by Ken Livingstone for being too left-wing. Sacked for fabricating a budget. He forged a budget, sacked for forging a budget. He would raise taxes taxes on inheritance, Mr. Speaker. He would raise taxes on pensions. I am answering. I'm telling you, Mr.
Order! Mr. Lavery, you're another overexcitable denizen of the House. Calm yourself. It would be therapeutic for you to do so. There's far too much noise on both sides of the House, and I fear that the noise on the front bench is proving contagious, and I note certain backbenchers who are becoming overexcitable, and they must restrain themselves. And I know the Prime Minister will, of course, be both passionate and restrained. The Prime Minister.
But it is only with an effort that I can master my feelings here, Mr. Speaker, because the right honourable gentleman will not only put up taxes on inheritance and pensions and corporations, he would put up taxes. He would put up taxes on income to 50p and above. He would put up taxes on income. There he is, the forger of the budget of 1984, Mr. Speaker. He would put up, give him a chance, he would put up taxes not just on homes but on gardens, Mr. Speaker. And he speaks about trust in our democracy. He speaks about trust in our democracy, Mr. Speaker. And I have to say, a most extraordinary thing has just happened today. Did anybody notice what happened today? Did anybody notice the terrible metamorphosis that took place, like the final scene of Invasion of the Body Snatchers? At last, this long-standing Eurosceptic, the right honourable gentleman, has been captured. He has been jugulated. He has been reprogrammed by his honourable friends. He has been turned now into a Remainer. He has turned Labour into the party in all the flip-flops he has performed in his tergiversating career. That is the one for which I think he will pay the highest price. Because it is this party now, this government, that is clearly on the side of democracy in this country. It is this party that is on the side of the people who voted so overwhelmingly in 2016. It is this party that will deliver the mandate that they gave to this Parliament, and which, by the way, this Parliament promised time and time and time again to deliver. And indeed, the right honourable gentleman and all his colleagues promised to deliver it. And the reality now is that we are the party of the people. We are the party. We are the party of the many. We are the party of the many, and they are the party of the few. We will take this country forwards. They, Mr. Speaker, will take it backwards.
Mr. Ian Duncan Smith.
Mr. Speaker, can I unreservedly welcome my right honourable gentleman to his place? And can I say to him, today I think the EU will have listened and realised that the days of supplication are over and that we are intent on a policy to leave the European Union. But could I urge him in the course of his attempts at the dispatch box not to be too unkind to his opposite number? He hasn't just become a Remainer. Over the last 3.5 years, he has been trying to remain again and again and again, despite his own party's determination. And can I ask him also then, in the process of his preparation to leave without a deal, if that were necessary, could he now not allow us to do this in private? Could he instruct his right honourable friend that all of this should now be done in public, week by week, to tell the world, to tell the European Union, to tell our colleagues that we are nearly ready, and then finally we are ready to leave, if necessary, without a deal?
I thank my right honourable friend very much for that excellent question and the point that he makes, and it is vital now as we prepare for a better deal, a new deal, that we get ready, of course, for no deal. Not that I think that will be the outcome, and not that I desire that outcome, but it is vital that we prepare business industry, every community in this country that needs farming, that needs the relevant advice. And as my right honourable friend has wisely suggested, there will be a very active and public campaign to do so.
Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and of course I should welcome the Prime Minister to his place, the last Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. You know, Mr. Speaker, it is often said that the Prime Minister lives in a parallel universe. Well, my goodness, that's been proven beyond any reasonable doubt this morning. In fact, it looked as if he was about to launch himself into outer space. Mr. Speaker, there are questions to be asked as to the mandate the Prime Minister has for the office he now occupies. He has been appointed not by this House, not by the people, but by the Tory party. What have they done? It horrifies me, Mr. Speaker, that the new Prime Minister finds his position through such an undemocratic process. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, it was the Prime Minister himself who called the system a gigantic fraud when Gordon Brown was parachuted into office just like he was 12 years ago. Mr. Speaker, Scotland did not vote for Brexit. We did not vote for no deal. And we most certainly did not vote for this Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister accept the First Minister's call this morning for an urgent meeting of the heads of government? Mr. Speaker, Scottish Government analysis has shown a no deal will hit the economy hard, with a predicted hit to GDP of 8%, threatening up to 100,000 Scottish jobs. And just this week alone, we've seen the IMF, we've seen the CBI, the TUC, the food and drink industry, the British Chambers of Business, all warning of a no deal. The Office of Budget Responsibility have revealed that a no deal could lead to a plunge in the value of the pound and leave a £30 billion black hole in the public finances. What analysis has the Prime Minister made of no deal? Because when he was asked last week, Mr. Speaker, he had no answer. He wants us to drive us off the cliff edge, and he does not even know the impact of the damage it will cause. This is the height of irresponsibility. Economic madness, driven by ideology. The Prime Minister supported by his new right-wing ideologues on the front bench. Mr. Speaker, a New Deal from Europe is the stuff of fantasy. Time and time again, Europe has made it clear the withdrawal agreement is not open for negotiation. Last night, Leo Varadkar confirmed once again it will not happen. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has no plan. He is full of bluster, but the consequences of his fantasy land will have devastating consequences. He is deluded. Let me warn the Prime Minister now. Try to take Scotland, try to take the United Kingdom out of the European Union on a no-deal basis. We will stop the Prime Minister from doing so. This House will stop the Prime Minister. We will not let the Prime Minister do untold damage to the jobs and constituents of our country. Parliament will stop this madness in its tracks. The Prime Minister was elected by 0.13% of the population. He has no mandate from Scotland. He has no mandate in this House. Scotland has had a Tory government it didn't vote for 36 of the last 64 years. Mr. Speaker, the Barnett formula that protects spending in Scotland has been criticised by the Prime Minister, by the Home Secretary and the Foreign Secretary. Will the Prime Minister today rule out changing the Barnett formula, or is Scotland under attack from this Prime Minister? The whole internal Tory party crisis has been a democratic outrage. Scotland's First Minister has been clear that she's now reviewing the timetable for his second independence referendum. Mr. Speaker, Scotland will not stand by and let decisions be taken by charlatans on our behalf. And finally, Mr. Speaker, can I ask the Prime Minister, do the honourable thing, call a general election Let the people of Scotland have their say.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the right honourable gentleman for his suggestion. I would point out that the people of this country have voted in 2015, they voted in 2016, they voted in 2017. What they want to see is this Parliament delivering on the mandate that they gave us, and including him. And I take no criticism, Mr. Speaker. I take no criticism, Mr. Speaker, about my election from the party whose leader, Nicola Sturgeon, replaced Alex Salmond, as far as I know, without a vote. Did she not? And I tell you why I think the right honourable gentleman is completely wrong in his analysis and his defeatism and his pessimism about our wonderful United Kingdom, which he seeks to break up. Because let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, if we can deliver a fantastic and a sensible and a progressive Brexit, which I believe we can, and the whole United Kingdom comes out, as I know that it will, what happens then to the arguments of the Scottish Nationalist Party? Will they seriously continue to say that Scotland must join the euro independent? Will they seriously suggest? Will they seriously suggest that Scotland must submit to the entire panoply of EU law? And will they, Mr. Speaker? Will they join Schengen? And will they? Is it really their commitment, Mr. Speaker, to hand back control of Scottish fisheries to Brussels just after this country, this great United Kingdom, has taken back that fantastic resource? Is that really the policy of the Scottish Nationalist Party? May I respectfully suggest to the right honourable gentleman that is not the basis on which to seek election in Scotland. We will win on a manifesto for the whole United Kingdom.
Sir Edward Lee.
Our history is littered with Prime Ministers being dealt an extraordinarily difficult hand, but by pluck and determination, finally winning through in Europe. But to make this possible, every MP has to realise this is no longer a conscience issue. We have to learn to compromise and vote for something which may not be the perfect solution for us personally, but is best for our nation.
I thank my right honourable friend very much for his remarks and for the spirit in which he makes them. And I may say to the whole House that he speaks for many of us in saying that we need to get this done, we can get it done, and we will get it done.
Joe Swinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The 3 million EU citizens are our family, our friends, our neighbours, our carers. Yet for 3 years they have been made to feel unwelcome in our country. They deserve better than warm words and more months of anxiety. They deserve certainty now. The Prime Minister has made assurances. So will he back the bill of my Lib Dem colleague Lord Oates to guarantee in law the rights of EU citizens, or is he all talk and no trousers?
Well, can I thank the right honourable lady and congratulate her on her own election, and I join her in insisting on the vital importance of guaranteeing the rights and protections of the 3.2 million who have lived and worked among us for so long. Of course, we are insisting that their rights are guaranteed in law, and I'm pleased to say that under our settlement scheme, 1 million have already signed up to enshrine their rights.
Aaron Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome my right honourable friend to his place as Prime Minister, and welcome also the optimistic tone that he has used in his opening statement. He has set out priorities for government, but could I ask him to consider 2 other priorities for government? The people of Northern Ireland have been without government for 2.5 years, and that has affected many. But most deeply it has affected those that were victims of historical institutional abuse, and those people who were severely and physically and psychologically disabled in the Troubles, through no fault of their own. Could he commit that he will deliver for those people?
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my right honourable friend very, very much for what she has done. She has worked tirelessly to promote good government, the restoration of government in Stormont. And she has a record, I think, of which she can be very proud indeed. And if and when Stormont is restored, it will be very largely thanks to her hard work, her efforts, and her diplomacy. And I thank her very much. And she's also right to insist on the proper way of sorting out some of these very difficult legacy issues. And I think it is common ground across this House that it is not right that former soldiers should face unfair prosecution with no new evidence for crimes or for alleged crimes when those charges were heard many years ago. And I thank her for what she has done in that respect as well.
Mr. Nigel Dodds.
Mr. Speaker, and can I, following the Right Honourable Lady, thank her for her service, a public service to Northern Ireland, and can I warmly congratulate the Prime Minister on his appointment and thank him for the conversations that we have had, and we look forward to further conversations in the coming weeks to ensure that we can have a sustainable Conservative and Unionist government going forward. The alternative is unthinkable in terms of national security and the union of the United Kingdom. Never mind the economic damage that would be inflicted upon this great nation of ours. So I warmly welcome his positivity, his optimism. That is what this country needs. And would he agree with me, in terms of our shared priority, that the union comes first, that we need to deliver Brexit with a deal, but we must be prepared for no deal if necessary. And thirdly, we need to get that devolution settlement up and running. But let us strain every sinew to strengthen the union, get a deal to leave on the right terms, and get Stormont up and running again.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank the Right Honourable Gentleman very much for all the cooperation and support that has enabled the government of this country to carry on and to protect the people of this country from the depredations of the party opposite, because that is frankly what we would face were it not for his encouragement and his support. And he is of course right in what he says about the primacy of the union, and he and I share the same perspective that we can do this by coming out as a United Kingdom, whole and entire, getting rid of that divisive, anti-democratic backstop that poses that appalling choice to the British government and to the British people, to the United Kingdom, of losing control of our trade, losing control of our regulation, or else surrendering the government of the United Kingdom. No democratic government could conceivably accept that, and I'm entirely at one with the Right Honourable Gentleman.
Patterson.
Can I congratulate my right honourable friend for getting off to a terrific start? His words yesterday outside Number 10 and today will have brought real hope and inspiration to people and interests right across the United Kingdom. He touched on one of them just now. The Common Fisheries Policy has been a biological, environmental, economic and social catastrophe which has ruined coastal communities and brought devastation to our marine environment. Some recent comments by government ministers have alarmed those fishermen that perhaps the negotiations will involve the CFP as a bargaining chip. Will the Prime Minister confirm to me that on the day we leave, we will establish total sovereignty over the EEZ and all the resources within it? We will become a normal marine nation like Norway or Iceland, and from then on, we will negotiate on an annual basis reciprocal deals with our neighbours.
I thank my right honourable friend Valiant for truth in these matters, as he has been for so long, and he is of course quite right that we have a fantastic opportunity now to take back control of our fisheries, and that is exactly what we will do. We will become an independent coastal state again, and we will under no circumstances make the mistake of the government in the 1970s, which traded our fisheries away at the last moment in the talks. That was a reprehensible thing to do. We will take back our fisheries, and we will boost that extraordinary industry.
Cooper.
Her Prime Minister said in his statement that he had alternative arrangements for the border.
I asked the Chancellor, the former Home Secretary, what those arrangements were, what the technology would be, 17 times, and he could not tell me. Can the Prime Minister tell me what the technology is, what the arrangements are, or is this just more bluster and guff?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Right Honourable Lady knows very well, it is common ground actually between the UK and indeed Dublin and the EU Commission that there are abundant facilitations already available, trusted trader schemes, electronic pre-registering, all manner of ways of checking whether goods are contraband or for rules of origin, and they can take place away from the border. Because I want to make one point that I think we are all agreed upon: under no circumstances will there be physical infrastructure or checks at the Northern Irish border. That is absolutely unthinkable.
Richard Bacon. Mr. Speaker, it is great to have an optimist as Prime Minister. Once we have left the EU, can we please have more service plots of land so that people can bring forward their own housing schemes? And will he encourage the Housing Secretary and the new Housing Minister to meet with the Right to Build Task Force as soon as possible, which has already, for the mere expenditure of £300,000 from the Nationwide Foundation, added 6,000 to 11,000 extra dwellings to the pipeline already?
I congratulate my honourable friend on the campaign he has waged for so long. He and I have discussed this. I think I tried to steal his idea years ago, and I support it. I support it unreservedly, and I'll make sure that the relevant meeting takes place as soon as possible.
Glory Ben.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister set out his new Brexit policy, but did he notice that yesterday the Taoiseach said that any suggestion that a whole new negotiation could be undertaken in weeks or months is not in the real world? If Leo Varadkar is right, and as a consequence the House of Commons votes in the autumn against leaving the European Union on the 31st of October without an agreement, what will the Prime Minister's policy be then?
Resign. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that what the Right Honourable Gentleman has said is redolent of the kind of defeatism and negativity that we've had over the last 3 years. Why begin by assuming that our EU friends will not wish to compromise? I think they have every reason to want to compromise, and that is what we will seek a compromise. And I respectfully say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, indeed to all honourable and right honourable members, that it is now our collective responsibility to get this done. And both parties, both the main parties in this House of Commons, know full well the hemorrhage of support that we face if we continue to refuse to honour the mandate of the people. And I think if he talks to his constituents in Chesterfield, he will. I'm sorry, forgive me, Leeds. I'm thinking of his father. His father, of course, was right about the EU. If he talks to his constituents in Leeds, he will know that they want him to honour the mandate of the people, and that is what we will do.
John Barron.
I very much congratulate my right honourable friend on assuming his role and on his cracking policies and appointments so far. Mr. Speaker, actions speak louder than words, and it says a great deal when the 4 great posts of state are held by descendants of immigrants, and we should take great pride in that. But can I just turn the Prime Minister's attention very briefly to something that affects millions of people in this country, and that is cancer. His predecessor introduced the 1-year cancer metric at the heart of the Cancer Long-Term Plan in order to encourage earlier diagnosis. This could save tens of thousands of lives a year. Will he look at that and commit to continue with that proud policy going forward?
I thank my right honourable friend for his question. The answer, simple and short answer, is yes, and my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Health, is only too happy to talk to him at his earliest convenience.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
Diolch yn fawr, Lefarydd. Data shows the Prime Minister faces a binary choice delivering Brexit on the 31st of October or maintaining his grip over the four nations of the United Kingdom. Now, he can indulge in bombast and gesticulation all he likes, but the facts are irrevocable. So can he confirm to me which is his heart's desire? Leaving the European Union or retaining the United Kingdom? Because he doesn't have to pick one. Do or die.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr. Speaker. My short answer to the right honourable lady is that, of course, the people of the whole United Kingdom voted to leave the EU, and the people of Wales, to the best of my knowledge, voted emphatically to leave the EU, and that is what we will do.
Sir Oliver Letwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend will be aware that he and I do not exactly see eye to eye on the question of the likely consequences of leaving without a deal. But may I ask him to maintain his optimism about the possibility of achieving a deal, and to recognise that there lies within this House, I believe still, a possible majority in favour of almost any sensible arrangement, and that I personally will certainly vote for any arrangement he makes for an orderly exit from the EU.
I thank my right honourable friend, who has been zealous in his pursuit of arrangements to prevent the no-deal option, and I share his desire not to get to a no-deal outcome, and I'm delighted that he is willing to put his shoulder to the wheel and work together to get the solution, to bring us together across the House and get this thing done. Because that is, I think, what the people want us to do.
Liz Kendall.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure if optimism was all it took to get things done, thousands of people would be spending this blisteringly hot, sunny day waltzing across his garden bridge and jetting off on holiday from Boris Island Airport. As it is, people need real solutions to their problems. So does the Prime Minister agree with me? Fixing the crisis in social care requires an immediate cash injection as well as long-term funding reform. It needs a system that works for disabled adults as well as older people. And above all, it means deciding that funding cannot be left to individuals and families alone. We must pool our resources and share our risks to ensure security and dignity for all.
Can I thank her very much for her question, and I agree very strongly with the thrust of what she says, and to suggest also, I suggest that it is high time that we again tried in this House to work across party to find a cross-party consensus about the way forward, because that is absolutely vital. If the party opposite is not interested, then we will fix it ourselves. But I urge them to think of the good of the nation.
Dr. Julian Lewis.
Thank the Prime Minister for the letter he sent to the Defence Committee earlier this month, pledging what he called an absolute commitment to fund defence fully. Does he accept that events in the Gulf have cruelly illustrated the fact that the size of the Royal Navy is now way below critical mass? So will he join with the Defence Committee in wishing to reverse the reckless reduction in defence spending by successive governments from 3.1% of GDP in the 1990s to just 1.8% in like-for-like terms today?
Thank you. I congratulate my right honourable friend on the campaign he has waged for many years to support our armed services, and I share with him a strong desire to increase spending, particularly on shipbuilding, which not only drives high-quality jobs in this country, but is a fantastic export for the UK around the world. And the ships we are building now are being sold for billions of pounds to friends and partners around the world. We should be very proud of what we're achieving.
Pat McFadden.
Does the government stand by the commitment made by the UK government in the joint UK-EU statement of December 2017 that, and I quote, In the absence of agreed solutions, the United Kingdom will maintain full alignment with those rules of the internal market and the customs union, which now or in the future support North-South cooperation, the all-island economy and the protection of the 1998 agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, that is the very trap from which it is now absolutely vital that we escape, because that December the 8th document effectively commits the UK, as he says, to remaining in regulatory alignment in the customs union. We believe, and it is common ground, as I say, in Dublin, in Brussels and elsewhere, that there are facilitations that are available to enable frictionless trade, not just at the Northern Irish border, but at other borders as well, in order for the UK to come out of the EU customs union whilst doing a free trade deal. And that is what we're going to achieve.
Richard Drax.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome my right honourable friend to his post, and I welcome the enthusiasm. I so welcome it. Can I ask the Prime Minister to come down to our seaside towns, which desperately need love and investment, and he'd be most welcome to come personally, and can I ask him to keep a focus on the future of seaside towns and the vital role they play in our communities?
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend, but he is totally right to focus on seaside towns and coastal communities, because too often they have been forgotten, their infrastructure has been forgotten, and our programme now as this new government is to unite this country with infrastructure, with better education and with technology, to bring opportunity, and not just to cities around the country, but to rural and coastal communities as well.
Anna Soubry.
Mr. Speaker, but despite all the optimism, if the Prime Minister fails to secure some magical, mythical new deal with the European Union, will he promise now at the dispatch box that the matter will return to this sovereign Parliament so that we can decide what happens next before October the 31st? A simple yes or no will do, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, this Parliament has already voted several times to honour the mandate of the people to come out of the EU, and that is what we should do. And I think that the Right Honourable Lady herself voted to trigger Article 50. Unless I'm mistaken, I would encourage her to stick by the pledge she made herself.
Anne Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that whilst money for schools is very welcome, further education and apprenticeships are probably the best enabler of social mobility, giving people a second or third chance? And will he make sure that both apprenticeships and further education have the cash that they desperately need?
Thank you, and I want to pay tribute to the Right Honourable Lady also for all the work that she has done in her career, and she is absolutely right to raise the issue of further education and skills, and indeed I had a long discussion on that very theme last night with the new Education Secretary, and that is going to be a priority of this government. Yes, it is a great thing that 50% of our country, 50% of kids should have the ambition to go to university, but of course it is equally important that the other kids should acquire the skills they need that can be just as valuable, can lead to just as fantastic careers, and it's vital that we invest now in further education and in skills.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The UK's air pollution is at illegal levels, and scientists are clear we need to do a lot more to address the growing climate crisis. Now, few will forget his pledge to lie down in front of the bulldozers to stop the construction of a third runway at Heathrow Airport. Luckily for him, luckily for us all, he is now in the steering wheel, at the steering wheel, and can turn those bulldozers around. Will he do it? Will he scrap the third runway?
I thank the Right Honourable Lady. Of course, the bulldozers are some way off, but I am following with lively interest the court cases, because I share her concerns about air quality and about pollution, though I would point out parenthetically, Mr. Speaker, that under this Conservative government, NOx pollution has in fact fallen by 29%. I don't think she didn't point that out, but I will study the outcome of the court cases with a lively interest, Mr. Speaker.
James Doddridge.
Angela Merkel has indicated that there might be some flexibility on the backstop. Does he believe, as I, that the French and Germans are likely to put the EU under more pressure to be flexible?
Well, I certainly thank my honourable friend, and I think that we should approach these talks in the spirit of maximum optimism. And I say that optimism seems to be a quality that is deprecated on the benches opposite, and I think it is a well-founded optimism, because common sense dictates that now is the moment for seriousness and for compromise, and that, I think, is what we are going to find.
Sharon Hodgson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning's announcement of 12,500 job losses at Nissan worldwide is really worrying, although at this stage there's no indication that any of these job losses are going to be at the Sunderland plant in my constituency. But it does highlight the fragile nature of the automotive industry. This really should refocus our minds, therefore, on the existential threat that a no-deal Brexit would have on the automotive industry in the UK. So, will the Prime Minister today rule out a no-deal Brexit and commit to an active, innovation-led industrial strategy that will protect our industrial towns and cities?
Mr. Speaker, I will indeed commit to that approach, because I think that is the right way forward. And if I may say so, the Nissan in Sunderland has the most efficient plant in the world, and a fantastic thing that is. And just in the last few weeks, she will have noticed that BMW has announced a huge investment to build electric minis at Cowley. JLR's put £1 billion into electric vehicles in Birmingham, and that, by the way, is how we will tackle the climate change issue, not with the hair shirtism of the Greens, but with wonderful new technology made in this country.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown.
Can I warmly congratulate my right honourable friend for lifting the mood of the nation? Would he look at the distribution of the record amount of funds that's going into education, not only to address the funding to further education, but also the distribution between the highest and the lowest funded education authorities?
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable. That is, of course, what we are doing. That is the nature of the pledge and the undertaking we are making with the £4.6 billion that we have announced. And the objective, as I think members will know by now, is to lift per capita funding, per pupil funding for primary schools to a minimum everywhere of 4,000 and a minimum everywhere of 5,000 for secondary school pupils.
I want to maximise participation, and therefore there is a premium on brevity. I appeal to colleagues to be unselfish, and to ask single-sentence questions without preamble, so that they're also helping their colleagues. Chris Stevens.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's statement is absent from the phrase workers' or employment rights. So can he commit now that EU workers' rights will be protected in the event of Brexit?
Not only that, Mr. Speaker, but under the freedoms that we will obtain, we will be able, where necessary, to enhance workers' rights in this country.
Maggie Throop.
Will my right honourable friend look at helping to make the work of the 20,000 more police officers more effective by implementing preventive measures such as restricting the number of properties being converted to houses of multiple occupancy, which are undoubtedly a magnet for antisocial behaviour?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my honourable friend. Of course, it's vital that we look at prevention measures of all kinds. I'm familiar with the problems that she raises, and I will take it up with my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has listed again a long list of public spending commitments. I, for one, can see the difference between optimism and fantasy. So either the Prime Minister is a fantasist, or he will tell us now how he's going to fund these.
As the honourable lady knows full well, there is ample. Actually, the spending pledges I have made have been modest. Mr. Speaker. I think so far. They have been modest, and they are well within the fiscal headroom that she knows this country currently enjoys. And it is about time that money was spent. But if she is opposing, if the benches opposite are now opposing that spending, if they now think that we shouldn't be putting another billion into policing and another 4.6 billion into education, then now is the time to speak. The front bench seem to have departed, Mr. Speaker.
Sir Peter Bottomley.
While waiting to vote a fourth time for a negotiated agreement with the EU 27, can I ask my right honourable friend if he'll recognise the achievement of the last 3 years in residential leasehold dealing with abuse, and can he lend his weight to make sure we go on making progress so that leaseholders are not abused or exploited?
Mr. Speaker, I'm well familiar with the problem that my right honourable friend describes and the injustice that many leaseholders have been facing, and I congratulate him on the campaign he has run, and we will make sure that we look after the interests of leaseholders who are being, I think, cheated at the moment.
Andrew Eagle.
Mr. Speaker, the sixth principle of public life reads, honesty. Holders of public office should be truthful. Can the Prime Minister tell us in his public life so far, can he stand at that dispatch box and tell us that he has maintained that principle?
I think, Mr. Speaker, that if the right honourable lady looks at what I've promised the British public and what I've promised the electorate in my political career, and she looks at what I have delivered time and time again when I have said I would deliver X, I've delivered X plus 20. And whether it was cutting crime in London or investing in transport or building more homes, by the way, than the Labour mayor ever did, I am very proud of my record and stand and fight on my record.
Andrew Percy.
Mr. Speaker, can I urge my right honourable friend the Prime Minister to continue all the efforts the government has so far been engaged in to secure and save a future for the British steel industry, which is so important to the north of England, and one way of doing that would be to commit quickly to HS3 Northern Powerhouse Rail.
I thank my honourable friend for his advice, and yes, I am a huge fan of Northern Powerhouse Rail. I went up to Manchester Airport and saw the plan. It's a truly visionary and exciting plan. I think we should definitely be doing it. And might I remind him, it's not just rails in this country that are built by British Steel in Scunthorpe. It may be to the advantage of the House and to the pessimists opposite to know that the TGV in France runs on rails made in Scunthorpe as well.
Laura Smith.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister recently appalled and offended many people when he criticised investigating historic child abuse as spaffing money up the wall. What does he have to say to those who have suffered at the hands of predatory paedophiles, especially those who are still seeking justice, and will he now apologise?
Mr. Speaker, this country is proud of its record as a world leader in fighting child sexual abuse, and under this government we will continue to lengthen that lead.
Justine Greeley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope the Prime Minister agrees that having a general election might be something that the Leader of the Opposition wants, but it's not what the country needs, and it won't resolve the Brexit deadlock. Will he bring back any Brexit plan and put it to this House, then put it to the people? Because that is the way that we can finally break the Brexit deadlock, unite the country, move on and get on to fixing the real problems that Britain faces, not least improving social mobility and achieving equality of opportunity.
Thank you. Well, my right honourable friend and I go back a long way, and she and I agree on so many things. But on this, I'm afraid, respectfully disagree, Mr. Speaker, because I think having a second referendum, which is now the policy of the party opposite. Have a second. That's where they are. That's where they are. It wasn't before, but they are now the party. They are now the party of return or revoke. Having a second referendum would, I think, be catastrophic for our union, because it would undermine, of course, our most important case, that when you have a referendum, that deeply divisive and toxic event should only take place once in every generation. That was what we said to the people of Scotland. How could we look at them again and refuse and not have a second referendum in Scotland if we have another referendum on the EU in the UK? It's simply the wrong thing to do.
Stephen Timms.
Given the welcome change of his recognition of the benefits of migration, will he bring forward the reconsideration system proposed by the former Home Secretary, now Chancellor, for overseas students falsely accused of cheating by the US firm ETS in its English language tests, so that those students finally have the chance to clear their names?
Thank you. I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman. I've been made aware by my Right Honourable friend of the issue to which he refers, and I will make sure that we write him about what we are doing to address it. But as he knows, I have a long-standing commitment to supporting the freedom of people to come to this country. I think if you look at my political record, I don't think you'll genuinely find anybody who's done more to champion the rights of immigrants to this city or to this country.
Mary Robinson.
Speaker, I welcome the Prime Minister's commitment to infrastructure, and in addition to his support of Northern Powerhouse Rail, could I also ask him to consider looking at ways that HS3 can be constructed from the north, thus maximising the jobs in our region?
Mr. Speaker, I've asked Doug Oakerby, the former chairman of Crossrail, to have a brief 6-week study of the profiling of the spend on HS2 to discover exactly whether such a proposal might have merit, and I will make sure that I revert to my honourable friend as fast as possible upon his conclusion.
Bridget Phillipson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following today's deeply troubling news from Nissan, has the Prime Minister spoken to the company about what impact this may have in Sunderland? And following his statement here in the House today, what reassurance can he really offer to the tens of thousands of workers in Sunderland and across the North East whose jobs and livelihoods depend on Nissan's continued success?
Mr. Speaker, the automotive sector globally is suffering a contraction as a result partly of the diesel crisis and the move to EVs and what is happening with demand in China. That is a fact. There is, as far as I know, no impact, and we've discussed this already, no impact in Sunderland yet. But I draw her attention again to the massive investments that are nonetheless happening in our country, in Oxford, in Birmingham, of world-beating companies investing in British technology. It's worth billions of pounds, and we should salute it.
Are you desperate to come in? Vicky Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I congratulate my right honourable friend, welcome him to his job and wish him the very best of luck in achieving an amicable agreement with the EU. On the subject of violent crime, which concerns many of my constituents, in Essex we are already seeing the impact from the extra 360 police that have been added to the force. So can I thank him for promising 20,000 more across the country, and will Essex get its fair share?
I thank my honourable friend, and I want to pay tribute also to the work of Roger Hurst, the PCC in Essex, who I think is also helping to deliver the numbers achieved. But it is good news that we're going to have even more, 20,000 more, and my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, is working on that right away.
Stuart Malcolm MacDonald.
Why does the Prime Minister refuse point blank to answer any questions put to him about his relationship with the former Russian arms dealer Alexander Temerkel, or indeed the owner of the Evening Standard, Evgeny Lebedev, who's written in glowing terms about President Putin and Assad? What exactly did he have on him?
Mr. Speaker, I struggle to find a point in the right honourable gentleman's question. If he has an allegation that he wishes to make, then I suggest he sends it to me in writing, and I'll be happy to respond.
David Tredennick.
Congratulate him on a brilliant start, and particularly supporting the health service. Is he aware that his counterpart in India, Prime Minister Modi, has oversight over 2 health ministries, the Health and Family Affairs Ministry and Ayush, which is the traditional and complementary medicine, which has 7,000 hospitals? Would he make sure his health secretary is in contact with Ayush?
I thank my honourable friend very much, and I congratulate him on his heroic campaign that he has waged to promote alternative medicines and therapies of all kinds. And I feel sure it would be to the benefit of my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary. Where is he? He's gone off to solve social care. But I think it's very important that we have an open mind about Ayurvedic medicine and other such therapies, but we should approach it on the basis, if I may respectfully say, of science first.
Steve McCabe. Does his guarantee for EU citizens extend to EU children in the British care system? And if so, how is he going to achieve that without changing the existing arrangements?
Prime Minister! Yes, Mr. Speaker, I believe that it does, and certainly we will make sure that local authorities are aware of their responsibilities.
Thank you. Robert Courts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I welcome the Prime Minister to his place and thank him for the passionate, optimistic defence of free market values that we've heard today. Could I ask him to look at the offer that we give our armed forces, in particular with a view to retention? Could I invite him also to visit RAF Brize Norton to welcome and thank them for the very hard work and the excellent work that they do there, but also to see where perhaps we need a little bit of help?
Mr. Speaker, I will be only too happy to visit my honourable friend in Brize Norton. If I have a feeling I may have to be going there in the course of my duties anyway. And I congratulate him on the campaign he wages and the interest he shows in our armed services, and particularly in the RAF. And I will make sure that they get the pay they deserve. And I believe that they are getting a new and improved pay settlement on Monday.
Sir Ed Davey.
Does the Prime Minister agree that the UK, Europe and the world face a climate emergency? And if he does, what's his plan?
Speaker, I'm glad that the right honourable gentleman asked that question, because, as he knows, it is this party and this government that is leading the world in setting a net zero target by 2050. And of course, there are people who don't think it can be done, Mr. Speaker. There are all sorts of sceptics and pessimists and Brito-sceptics who think that this country can't pull it off. But actually we can. And we have cut carbon emissions in this country massively since 2010, and we will continue to do so. And the right honourable gentleman says that it was his achievement. I would remind him, when I was Mayor of London, even though the population of London expanded by 200,000 during my tenure as Mayor, we cut CO2 emissions by 14% with new technology, and that is the approach we will adopt.
Helen Whately.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I share my right honourable friend's optimism for a deal, not least if we are fully prepared for no deal. As a Kent MP, can I ask him to make sure that those preparations will keep freight flowing through Kent's ports?
Yes. Minister. I thank my honourable friend. She's quite right. It is vital that we give business in Kent and hauliers of all kinds the logistical support that they need, and a huge amount of work, as she knows, is already being done.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's quite clear that this is now a vote leave government, and contrary to what he just said to my friend for Gateshead, he has been clear about the possibility of a no-deal Brexit. So, Mr. Speaker, can I take him back to his words as part of vote leave? He said on the 1st of June 2016, no change to the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic, and the day before the referendum, he said he wanted to reassure people that voting leave would mean that there won't be a sudden change that disrupts the economy. No change to the border, no sudden change to the economy. Does he stand by his promises? Yes or no?
Of course, because that is the most sensible way forward. And as I think the House will have heard several times by now, this government will under no circumstances institute checks at the border in Northern Ireland. And as for a smooth and orderly departure from the EU, that is now in the hands of our friends and partners. And I hope and I hope that they will see sense. I hope that they will see sense and compromise.
For decades, members in this House across the political divide have been critical of other countries' democratic processes. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that failure to deliver on the public mandate to leave the EU would ensure that our credibility on the international stage would be irreparably damaged?
Prime Minister!
My right honourable friend is absolutely right, and it is a sad irony that the party opposite, which, as I said earlier on, purports to be the party of the people, is now the party that seeks to thwart the will of the people. And it sends a terrible message around the world.
Deirdre Brock.
Meet Cambridge Analytica about in December 2016 when he was Foreign Secretary.
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I have no idea.
Andrew Sellew.
The Luton and Dunstable Hospital has a capital bid approved by the Department of Health and Social Care. Will the Prime Minister ask the Chancellor to look favourably on it?
Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Chris Bryant.
My constituents aren't looking for handouts. They want to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. They're ambitious. They want to get on in life and provide for their children. But just sometimes they have to rely on universal credit. As it's structured now, you don't get a penny for the first 5 weeks unless you take out a loan from the government. That loan puts them into debt from the moment they start on universal credit. Will he please, please, please look at taking away that 5-week problem?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the right honourable gentleman, I'm sure, knows that you can get an 100% advance on universal credit on day one. And as he knows, and the party opposite wants to scrap universal credit, and I hear what they say, but it is universal. It is the old welfare system that kept people trapped in benefits. 200,000 people are going to be lifted out of benefits and into work thanks to universal credit, and it has added massively to the incomes of 700,000 families across this country.
Trudy Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the hottest day on record and with escalating tensions in Iran, does my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, agree that the time is now for a UK nuclear renaissance? And can I add, Mr. Speaker, that Copeland is the centre of nuclear excellence?
Prime Minister. I thank my honourable friend. She's entirely right. It is time for a nuclear renaissance, and I believe passionately that nuclear must be part of our energy mix, and she is right to campaign for it. And it will help us, by the way, to meet the carbon targets that the pessimists on the other side think are too ambitious.
Debbie Abraham.
Mr. Speaker, I love our country, but what I love most about our country is the people, all the people. But the reality is, all the evidence is showing that the richer are getting richer and the poorer are getting, all the evidence and the poorer are getting poorer. You're right. With those hit by austerity dying early. So, what is the Prime Minister going to do now to address these inequalities, not by 2050? Or does taking back control mean that he is more interested in sustaining wealth, income and power with the few, not the many?
Well, I'm afraid what the honourable lady says is absolutely diametrically the opposite of the truth, because income inequality has in fact declined since 2010. It has. The incomes of families on the living wage, a policy promulgated by this government, have increased by £4,500 for those that are on it since 2010, and wages are now rising faster than inflation for the first time in a decade. And it is this party that is committed to higher wages and higher skills. It's that party that wants higher taxes and fewer jobs.
Bill Wiggin.
Mr. Speaker, nowhere is enthusiasm and optimism more needed than in the agriculture sector. So can I just welcome what he said in his statement about the future for food in this country?
Mr. Speaker, I thank my right honourable friend very much, and he is a doughty champion for food and farming in this country for many, many years, and he is quite right to be suffused as he is with optimism about it.
Dr. Sarah Wollaston.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the inclusion of social care in the Prime Minister's list of priorities for his government. As he will know, that there's the thorny issue about how we should pay for it. Two select committees of this House work together with a citizens' assembly to reach a consensus on how we should fund this fairly. Will the Prime Minister meet with me and with the member for Sheffield South East to discuss how we reach a consensus and get it done?
I thank you. I thank the honourable lady, and I will of course make sure that I study the suggestions that she has made in her reports, and they will of course be taken into account as we come forward with a solution, a plan for social care.
James Heapy.
Thank you very much, sir. Given the busyness of the last few days, the Prime Minister might have missed the new leader of the Liberal Democrats saying that she would ignore a leave vote in a second referendum. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that campaigning for a referendum that you intend to ignore is pretty pointless?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, and it smacks of tyranny. It smacks of tyranny. These people pretend to be Democrats, and yet their plan is to quash the will of the people time and time and time again.
Alex Norris.
Football games. 2 months ago, ministers confirmed to me that they have the report, but that members couldn't see it. The Prime Minister says he's a plain speaker. Could he exercise some plain speech today, release this report and get safe standing going at our football ground?
I thank the honourable gentleman for raising that very important point with me, and I'm informed that the issue of safe standing at football matches is currently under review, but clearly we take it extremely seriously.
Alberto Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say thank you to the Prime Minister on his first day here in the House of Commons? He's given an unequivocal guarantee to EU nationals like my mother and father. That should have been done 3 years ago by the previous administration. But can I say, having met Mr Barnier last Friday, if the Prime Minister wants to take the country out on a no-deal basis, can he confirm he will do everything in his power to protect the 1.3 million British nationals living and working in the EU?
Of course. I thank the honourable gentleman for what he has done to protect the rights, not just obviously of his not just, forgive me, Mr. Speaker, not just of his parents, but of the 3.2 million and the 1.3 million UK nationals living and working in the rest of the European Union. It is self-evidently in the interests of our friends and partners on the other side of the Channel that they should give symmetrical protections, and I'm sure that they will. But I think the House would agree that it is also incumbent on us to look after the rights of the people who have lived, worked, dwelt among us, made their lives here, and that is what we are doing.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Some unkind fellows have suggested the new Prime Minister doesn't do detail, but I heard him just admit we've already spent £4.2 billion as a country on stockpiling medicines, lorry parks and fridges in the event of no deal. Now, he said that the Chancellor has confirmed all necessary funding will be made available if we continue no deal preparation. So can he put a figure on that number, because I'm sure he wouldn't come without an idea as to what it is?
I thank you. Of course, the honourable lady is not quite right, because the figure she refers to is not the amount that has been spent, but the amount that was allocated by the previous Chancellor of the Exchequer. And may I make a point that I think the House should reflect on about this expenditure and what we're trying to do now in getting ready for a no-deal Brexit. Not that we want it, but we must get ready for it. It is that under any circumstances in the next few years, it will be necessary for the UK to extricate itself from the customs union and the regulatory orbit of Brussels. And that will require changes in which it is important to invest. And that is what we are going to do now. And that is why there will be a big public information campaign. And I'm sure she will be wanting to join in advertising the benefits of that campaign.
Order. I'd like to accommodate everybody. That may not be possible, but I'm going to try. Single sentence questions. If people go beyond that, they'll be cut off. Simple as that. Colin Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister visited Aberdeen and saw the successful oil and gas industry, which by delivering hydrogen can deliver net zero. Does he agree this is an industry supporting 280,000 jobs he will get behind?
And I congratulate my honourable friend on what he's doing to support our hydrocarbon industry in Aberdeen and thereabouts. and clearly it has that industry has a great future, and can be used additionally to help reduce our carbon footprint as well.
Emma Lilbach.
Mr. Speaker, as Prime Minister, his trademark bluff and bluster won't wash. He needs to be on top of the details. So can he now answer what is in Article 24, paragraph 5C of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade?
Prime Minister! Mr. Speaker, as the honourable lady knows full well, we intend not that we will get to that situation, and not that I wish to rely remotely on Article 5C, but we intend, of course, if we have to confide absolutely in Article 5B, which provides ample.
No, but I'm quite certain. I don't know what the honourable lady is looking so dissatisfied about. I'm quite sure that the Prime Minister will be able to quote it verbatim in Latin by September the 3rd when the House returns. Simon Clark.
Thanking my right honourable friend for his commitment on free ports, which is fantastic news for Teesside, can I just push him on one issue regarding our local industrial strategy, which is, of course, the maintenance of the current government approach to the sale of British steel. This is essential, providing investor confidence.
Yes, I thank my honourable friend, and he can take it that this government is going to leave no stone unturned to get a good solution for British steel at Scunthorpe, at Skinning Grove and elsewhere.
Thank you.
The North East children and young people will be off school today and may well be watching this spectacle, but forgive me for not encouraging them to have faith in the Prime Minister's bluster and warm words, because the simple fact is that a no-deal Brexit puts at risk our 63% exports to the EU and therefore their families' jobs.
Well, I hope that the children in her constituency that she describes will be able to learn from watching these proceedings that they are going to get more funding for their schools. 4,000 per pupil in primary schools, 5,000 per pupil in secondary schools, and I'm sure that will be welcome news to them all.
Henry Smith!
Mr. Speaker, the vast majority of people in my constituency who voted to leave welcome the determination of the Prime Minister to deliver Brexit. Beyond that, we welcome extra police numbers because we share a concern about rising crime. When can we know the numbers for different force areas?
Thank you, my honourable friend. I can tell him that he will know as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister talks passionately about unleashing the productive potential of the whole of the North East, just as he did about freeing kippers, but without the detail. So can he now say to me what are the three things he admires most about the North East, and how a no-deal Brexit would make them more productive?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, do you know what? I think the people of the North East should be left to decide what it is they admire most about that fantastic region, and I think it would be absolutely patronising of anybody to say what they admire about any particular region of the UK. But I will say that the North East is the only region of the UK which is a net exporter. And it will, yes, I bet she didn't know that. Mr. Speaker, because she's not interested. She's not interested in economic success, and we're interested in backing business and industry.
Order, we must restore some calm. I've been listening with rapt attention to the Prime Minister, but I don't want his arm to collide with the microphone, because it would be analogous to a tennis player crashing into the net. And I know that the Right Honourable Gentleman would never do that, knowingly or otherwise. Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. Across the country, more young people are carrying knives and knife crime has gone up. My right honourable friend, in his previous role as the excellent Mayor of London, solved this. What action will he take now to solve it across the country, because it will take time for the new police officers to arrive?
I thank my honourable friend for his campaigns for safer streets in his constituency, and I was proud to work with him in London when we reduced serious youth violence by 32%. We reduced the murder rate, which I don't think even the pessimists and the doubters opposite could contest. We reduced the murder rate by 50%. We kept the murder rate in London at fewer than 100 for more than 4 or 5 years running. And the way to do it, the way we reduced knife crime in London, was by a very active policy of stop and search, which I know the party opposite opposed. They were wrong. We took thousands of knives off the streets of London, 11,000 knives. We saved lives across the city, and my honourable friend can be proud of what he did to help that campaign.
Just hold on. Bambos Charalambos. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister stated his commitment to increasing school funding, but this week we've learned that his predecessor's announcement of 2.7% increase for teachers would only be partially funded by the government, meaning that schools are going to face budget cuts as a result. So would he demonstrate his commitment to schools by agreeing to fully fund this teacher's pay increase?
Mr. Speaker, the position is very clear. We've just committed to a £4.6 billion package of extra funding to lift up funding across the country, and that is what we are going to do.
Peter Bone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite it being the hottest night of the year last night, it's the first time in months that I have slept soundly. Prime Minister, will you ensure that I and millions of others can sleep soundly in our beds?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I hesitate to do anything to disrupt the nocturnal arrangements of my honourable friend in any way, except to say that I think the whole country can sleep soundly in the knowledge that we are going to come out of the EU on October the 31st. We're going to get it done. We're going to deliver on the mandate of the people, and we're going to take this country forward in a way that I think it wants.
Peter Kyle.
Speaker, precisely which workers' rights does he want to enhance that presently we're prohibited to do from the EU?
Mr. Speaker, that will be a matter for this House, and he should welcome that opportunity. And if he is now saying that he does not wish to do anything to improve the rights of workers in this country, if he is saying that the entire corpus of EU law must remain whole and inviolate and untouched, and that is why the people of this country are fed up of remaining in the EU, want to be able to legislate for the advantage of the people of this country.
The model brevity from Hove must now be matched by Cheltenham. Mr. Alex Chalk.
His father is a great champion of the environment. Will he continue that noble family tradition?
Mr. Speaker, I certainly will. I want to congratulate my honourable friend from Cheltenham for everything he does also to promote the environment. And I think it is an amazing thing the way, thanks to the work of colleagues on these benches, the environment, green issues are now seen to be the agenda that we Conservatives lead on. And we will continue to make improvements in our environment that will be of immense value to the people of this country.
Diana Berger.
Prime Minister yesterday started the job that he always wanted. But what is he going to do to guarantee the millions of people across our country are not going to see their employment end because we are hurtling towards a no-deal Brexit which does not command the majority of this House?
Mr. Speaker, the answer is for this House of Commons to do what is sensible and right and deliver on the mandate of the people and get Brexit done by October the 31st. And that is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Prime Minister's statement on increasing funding to education. Might he expand more on what we might do to help those with special needs, because they are of considerable need, not just in my constituency, but across the whole country?
Minister, I thank my honourable friend, and he's entirely right, and he may have noticed that we have announced policies to allow special educational needs schools to be established, and in areas where local authorities need those SEND schools, and we will fund them.
Jonathan Reynolds.
Speaker, the new Prime Minister has just outlined a very significant spending programme. The new Chief Secretary of the Treasury has already committed to government debt falling every year, and we know a no-deal Brexit would be a significant cost to the national finances. Prime Minister, how are any of those three things compatible with each other?
Yeah. The answer is actually that the spending commitments so far are really rather modest, but they can be amply financed by the strength of the UK economy, which that party would jeopardise by their retrograde policies.
William Bragg.
Speaker, will schools be getting some of that welcome extra cash in this financial year or wait to the next?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Mr. Speaker, it is my intention that they should get the extra cash as fast as can be humanly expedited.
James Frith. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 80% of all children excluded from mainstream schools have special educational needs and disabilities. It's not enough to simply fund new specialist schools when actually what we need is mainstream education supporting special educational needs and disability. What's his plan for that? And it ain't just about cash.
And I thank the honourable gentleman. He is entirely right that all schools need funding for SEND, and that is part of the £4.6 billion programme that we have announced.
James Morris.
Would the Prime Minister agree with me that, notwithstanding his commitment to increasing capital funding on NHS to rebuild the NHS estate, that we should also focus on improving mental health care across our country, building on the work that myself and others around this House have done over the last 5 years to make sure that we deliver for those people too?
The honourable gentleman is entirely right, and I believe that one of the things we should do is to promote mental health in this country by giving businesses incentives to look after the mental health of their employees and prevent the burden from falling so heavily on the NHS and on social services.
Maria Eagle.
In his statement, he said he wants to govern for the whole of the country, but in a previous role, the right honourable gentleman has accused my constituents of wallowing in their victim status, repeated offensive and proven untruths about the cause of the Hillsborough disaster, and called Liverpool self-pity city. So will he now apologise from that dispatch box to the people of Liverpool for the offence that he's caused?
Mr. Speaker, I ask the right honourable lady to look at my political record and look at what we've achieved. Look at what I have done as a one-nation Conservative, as a lifting up, helping with policies that are uniformly delivering better outcomes for the poorest and neediest in society. And that is what I stand for, and that is what I believe in, and that is what this whole government is going to deliver.
Does my right honourable friend welcome the findings of the Alternative Arrangements Commission led by me and our right honourable friend, the member for Loughborough?
Prime Minister, I do, and they are, if I may say, a withering retort to the gloomsters opposite, who say that there is no solution, who begin the prospect of negotiations by saying that defeat is inevitable. It is not true. As my right honourable friend has identified, the facilitations do exist, the remedies do exist. What it takes now is the political will to get there.
Stephen Kinnock.
Speaker, the Conservative Party's manifesto 2017 says we need to deliver a smooth and orderly departure from the European Union, and that phrase is repeated 8 times in the document. Does the Prime Minister therefore agree with me that he has no mandate to deliver no deal?
The honourable gentleman will also, since he is a keen student of Conservative Party manifesto, know that the government was committed both then and since to prepare for a no-deal outcome. Not that we wanted. Not that we wanted. I'm grateful to my honourable friend who it reminds me from a sedentary position. The policy was that no deal was better than a bad deal. And we don't want it, but the way to avoid it is to prepare well for it.
Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Can I congratulate the Prime Minister and welcome him to his role? Mr. Speaker, 19% of my constituents do not still have access to 10 megabytes of broadband, affecting their business, educational and leisure opportunities. Can my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, commit to, as he has done during the campaign, to delivering broadband to every one of my constituents?
I thank my honourable friend, and of course she may have noticed that in the course of the recent election campaign I made it absolutely clear that we will accelerate, Mr. Speaker, the programme of full fibre broadband by 8 years, so that every household in this country gets full fibre broadband within the next 5 years.
Andrew Slaughter.
Speaker, will the Prime Minister order an inquiry into the £76 million wasted paying management consultants to work on the Shaping a Healthier Future programme for North West London, which the Health Secretary has now abandoned after 9 years?
Minister.
I can certainly say that I think the Shaping a Healthy Healthier Future programme for North West London has not perhaps delivered the results that we wanted, but I think he and I share a constituency interest, shall we say, in ensuring that we get the improvements to healthcare in not just in North West London but across the country. And that is why this party and this government is spending an extra £20 billion in health. That's why I yesterday announced new upgrades for 20 hospitals across the country, and including some, I believe, in North West London.
Menzies. I welcome the Prime Minister to his role and also his commitment to infrastructure in the north of England. Can the Prime Minister commit to me that the Government will continue to invest in small projects across the north of England, such as the M55 Lytham St Anne's bypass?
I thank my honourable friend, and I lost count in the course of this recent campaign of the number of duelling schemes and bypasses that I seem to commit myself to. But I will certainly make sure that we invest massively in road, because although I believe passionately in mass transit, there is no doubt that for many people, investment in our roads, improving our roads, is absolutely essential for economic progress.
Marion Fellows.
The Prime Minister said some may accuse him of hyperbole. I don't. I accuse him of getting his facts wrong. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, was elected by the Scottish Parliament in 2014, defeating Ruth Davidson by 51 votes. Will he apologise for getting it wrong?
Prime Minister.
Well, I was relying on the very, very clear advice of a very distinguished colleague of mine. I will undertake, Mr. Speaker, to write to the honourable lady with further and better particulars about the dispute that seems to have arisen between us about that point of fact.
Alex Shelbrooke.
Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend I know to my core is a great One Nation Conservative, and in that spirit, I ask my right honourable friend, when his very busy schedule, can he find time to take a close look at my 6-year campaign to ban unpaid internships, which I'm sure he will agree will bring great meritocracy to this country.
Prime Minister. I absolutely endorse the campaign that my honourable friend has run, and we should be a meritocracy, and people should be able to get access to jobs not according to who they know but according to their talents, and he is entirely right in what he is.
Rachel Maskell.
Mr. Speaker, the Office of Prime Minister is accountable to this House, so detail is needed. Exactly what changes to the withdrawal agreement does he believe he can achieve?
I'm grateful to the honourable lady, and the answer I think was contained in my statement, which is that, and she will have heard it along with the House. What we need to do is, as a first step. Let me put it that way. As a first step to get rid of the backstop, which I remember, I listened to the debate. It was opposed by people on all sides of the House, and if our friends and partners will see their way round to doing that, I believe we'd be well on our way to solving the problems.
Jeremy Lefroy.
Speaker, will my right honourable friend support the establishment of a standalone UK investment and development bank, such as those which the Netherlands, Germany and France have, even though they're also members of the EIB, which are about to leave? And could we have one of the first investments being a giga-battery factory in the West Midlands?
Mr. Speaker, not only will I endorse that suggestion, but I will invite him to meet my right honourable friend the Chancellor at the earliest possible opportunity to discuss it.
Clive Efford.
Speaker, what does it say to the promises of restoring sovereignty to this House that the Prime Minister made when he was leading the Leave campaign, that he has appointed Dominic Cummings to be one of his major policy advisers? Was he right to defy the Select Committee and not attend?
Mr. Speaker, this government is appointing a fantastic team that will take this country forward, and I think that is absolutely astonishing. He talks of the campaign to leave the European Union. People on that side of the House voted to trigger Article 50. I think it is an utter disgrace. It is an utter disgrace that they are now trying to reverse that result.
Marcus James.
Mr. Speaker, I very much welcome our honourable friend's programme for government, as he employs
an additional 20,000 police officers, can he ensure that county areas like Warwickshire get their fair share?
Prime Minister! And not only that, we must also do much more to ensure that police in rural areas get out to victims of crime in a timely and efficient way. And I know that my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, will be insisting on that as well.
Annalisa Dodds.
Mr. Speaker, if he actually cares about it, why did he devote only one sentence out of 61 sentences in his speech last night, and only 2 sentences out of 97 in his statement today to the climate emergency?
Absolutely. The Prime Minister.
I'm grateful to the honourable lady for parsing and counting the lines in my speech. I can tell her that I think by what I've said today, the House will know that we place the climate change at the agenda, the absolute core of what we are doing. And by the way, she will also, I think, acknowledge that it is this party, by committing to net zero by 2050, that is not only leading the country, but leading the world. And it is this party that believes in the private sector generated technology that will make that target attainable and deliver hundreds of thousands of jobs. That is the approach we shall follow.
With this new spirit of optimism on this side of the House, will my right honourable friend tell one of his ministers to organise a city status competition so at long last Southend-on-Sea can become a city?
The Prime Minister! I think, Mr. Speaker, I have no alternative but to answer in the affirmative to that question.
Ian Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has repeated that this United Kingdom will leave the European Union by the 31st of October with or without a deal. So can he tell the House what range of figures he's working to as to the impact on GDP to any outcome?
Minister. Mr. Speaker, that is why it is absolutely vital that we prepare for a no-deal outcome, because after all, the more determined and the more careful our preparations, the less likely the risk of any disruptive or disorderly Brexit at all.
Tom Bursklev.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. His commitment to 20,000 new police officers is very welcome, as was the now Chancellor's commitment to a new policing covenant. We've managed to get back Boris over the line. When does he expect to complete the job on back Bobbies?
Prime Minister.
Thank my honourable friend. The answer is as soon as possible, certainly within the next 3 years.
Ms. Leslie.
The Prime Minister surely doesn't agree with the Home Secretary about the return of the death penalty, does he?
Prime Minister. I have the fullest admiration for the Home Secretary's policies on law and order. I don't myself support the death penalty, but I think what the people of this country do want to see is proper sentencing for serious violent and sexual offenders, and they don't. And I'm glad to see some nodding from the Labour benches of it, because they know there are members opposite who know where their constituents truly are on some of these issues, and they're right, unlike the current leadership of this of the party opposite, and that is what we will do. But of course we will also be pursuing all the preventive measures necessary to reduce our prison population and to pursue a humane and liberal approach at the same time.
Alan Mack.
Mr. Speaker, I congratulate the Prime Minister on his election. Britain is establishing itself as a world leader in the new technologies of the fourth industrial revolution. Will my right honourable friend support our small businesses and start-ups that create the wealth that fund our public services?
Yeah, a lot of good work. I thank my honourable friend for all the good work he's done to promote investment in such start-ups, and I look forward to further conversations with him about ways we may encourage that investment.
Catherine West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister says he believes in the London living wage, and yet so many cleaners in Whitehall are still not paid it. Will he commit today, from the dispatch box, that every single entry-level worker and cleaner in Whitehall will be paid the living wage, regardless of whether they work for the Ministry of Justice, International Development or any others?
Prime Minister. I thank the honourable lady for that important point, and I have to say that if yes, the answer is yes. And it is. I was very proud when I was running London that we massively actually expanded the living wage, and we made sure that it was paid not just by GLA bodies but by their contractors as well, and that is what we should be doing.
I remind colleagues of the one-sentence imperative. David Duquette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and may I welcome my honourable friend to his post. And can I also welcome the comments he made earlier about the SNP's policy on fishing to take us back into CFP. Can he also confirm that as we come out of the CFP, we become an independent coastal state and only negotiating on access to our waters on an annual basis?
My honourable friend is completely right, and I congratulate him on the vision that he has for promoting Scottish fisheries and for using the opportunity coming out of the EU to build that extraordinary industry, and he and I have discussed it, and I think we should be taking forward the plans that he suggests. And it is quite dismal to listen to the SNP because, as I say, they would give back to Brussels control over our fisheries. What kind of a manifesto is that? I bet they U-turn on that before too long, Mr. Speaker.
Pete Wisher! Why does the Prime Minister think he is so unpopular in Scotland? Just him being Prime Minister, independence for Scotland rises to 53%. Is it all this Eton schoolboy bluster and buffoonery, or is it because he's prepared to take our nation out of the European Union against its will and a no-deal Brexit?
I think possibly the reason why I seem to get a good reception in Scotland, which I may say I did when I went to Aberdeen. I remember arriving, meeting some friends in Aberdeen Airport, and they're a very friendly reception throughout them. It may be because the people of Scotland recognise that they have a commonsensical Conservative approach, which would not hand back control of their fisheries to Brussels, just as Scotland has regained control of its fantastic fish.
Charles Watley, Mr. Speaker. I thank my right honourable friend for bringing some sunshine into this place, and I would invite him to come to the Sunshine Coast of Clacton if he can put up with the 1 hour 40-minute journey that it takes to cross the 69 miles. Will his government please focus on infrastructure to places like ours, which is so often overlooked?
I thank you for the plea he has put in, and he has added the line to Clacton to the long list of infrastructure projects that I propose now to expedite. But he is quite right, because our programme is to use infrastructure, education and technology. Infrastructure, education and technology to level up across the country, and that's what we're going to do.
Luke Pollard. Will the Prime Minister join me in opposing the early release of Vanessa George, the serial paedophile who abused babies and toddlers in Plymouth, especially as she still refuses to show remorse by naming which one of those babies she abused, filmed and circulated images of?
I understand why the honourable gentleman was nodding to my answer earlier on, and of course it would be wrong of me to intervene in particular cases, but I think he and I are one in agreeing that people should serve appropriate sentences for serious crimes.
Ross Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I know that my right honourable friend, from his head to his toes, is a committed and passionate unionist. Yeah. Therefore, does he agree with me that as we leave the European Union on the 31st of October as one UK, and as powers come back to this country from Brussels, we can strengthen the bonds of our four nations?
I think my honourable friend makes a powerful case, and I think that when we come out of the EU as a United Kingdom, whole and entire and perfect, the SNP will find that their guns are spiked and the wind has been taken out of their sails, and their sole manifesto commitment is a bizarre pledge to restore the control of Scotland's fish to Brussels. That's what they stand for, that's their programme, and I'm waiting for the U-turn.
Dr. Rupert!
London Mayor, the Prime Minister courted popularity with pledging an amnesty for illegal immigrants and his vocal opposition to Heathrow expansion. So now he's in a position to do something about these two. Is he a man of his word?
Prime Minister.
As the honourable lady will know very well, I've answered the question on Heathrow. I remain deeply concerned about the abilities of the promoters of the third runway to meet their obligations on air quality and noise pollution, and I will follow the court cases with a lively interest. And as for the amnesty on illegal immigrants, it is absolutely true that I have raised it several times since I was in government, and I must say didn't receive an overwhelming endorsement from the previous Prime Minister when I raised it once in cabinet. But I have to say I do think that our arrangements in theoretically being committed to the expulsion of perhaps 500,000 people who don't have the correct papers and who may have been living and working here for many, many years without being involved in any criminal activity at all, I think that legal position is anomalous. And we saw the difficulties that that kind of problem occasioned in the Windrush fiasco. We know the difficulties that can be caused, and I do think, yes, I'll answer her directly, I do think we need to look at our arrangements for people who have lived and worked here for a long time, unable to enter the economy, unable to participate properly or pay taxes, without documents. We should look at it, and we should. The truth is that the law is already basically allows them an effective amnesty. That's basically where things have settled down. But we should look at the economic advantages and disadvantages of going ahead with the policy that she describes, and which I think she and I share.
Chris Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister share Margaret Thatcher's belief in home ownership? And will his government do everything it can, including perhaps implementing some of the stamp duty reforms I suggested last week, to promote the home ownership dream?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for everything he's done to promote home ownership, for the stamp duty reforms, and myself, I believe that in this fantastic capital city of Europe and of the world, I think stamp duty is choking the market at the moment. We do need to think about the way it's working, and to see what we can do to free it up and to give more people the chance of home ownership.
Joanna Cherry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2012, when the majority of the members of the Scottish Parliament wanted to hold an independence referendum, his predecessor and friend David Cameron agreed the means to do so. Now that the same mandate exists, is he brave enough to do the same, or is he afraid he'll be the last Prime Minister of the United Kingdom?
I think that the former Prime Minister, distinguished former Prime Minister, committed, and it was universally agreed that the event in 2014 was a once-in-a-generation referendum, and that's the way it should be.
Maria Miller.
My right honourable friend will know that under the Conservatives we've got record numbers of women in work in this country. And if we're going to be successful post-Brexit, we've got to make sure we continue that. Will my right honourable friend join me to help those 50,000 women a year who feel that they've got no option but to leave their jobs because of pregnancy discrimination? Will he help me enforce the law so that we can have more of those women being productive members of society?
And I thank my right honourable friend for everything she has done to promote working women and equalities of all kinds, and I will certainly look at what we can do to alleviate the difficulties that pregnant women in particular face, and we'll get on with that.
Tom Bray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Crashing out with no deal would be an unacceptable outcome, damaging to our economy, undermine our future prosperity. Those are the views of three ministers who are now in his government. Does he accept that there is no mandate for no deal, and that if he proceeds with no deal, it will be against the will of this House, the will of the people, and indeed he will be solely responsible for the chaos that will ensue?
Well, I wonder how many referendums we would have to have before the Liberal Democrats actually respected the result.
Clean. Rachel.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been here quite a while now, and the Prime Minister definitely hasn't reached his quota of 20 for hospital upgrades. So does he agree with me that the Alex in Redditch and the Worcestershire Acute must be number 1 and number 2?
I thank my honourable friend for that very cunningly posed question. And I think she may be fortunate because I'm given to understand that the hospital in question serves the Chancellor's constituency as well.
Diana Johnson.
I know in government
government, you have to make tough investment decisions. So I want to know from the Prime Minister, what's his priority? Crossrail for the north, fully electrified from Hull to Liverpool, or Crossrail 2 for London?
Minister, I refuse to. It's like asking a tigress to choose between her cubs, Mr. Speaker. I refuse to choose.
Lady Hughes. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister commit to fight on behalf of persecuted Christians worldwide following the release of the recent Truro report?
Mr. Speaker, I certainly will. I thank the honourable for his question.
The Prime Minister's carelessness and lack of attention to detail aided and abetted the Iranian regime in locking up a British citizen. Can I ask the Prime Minister now to put right what he did so wrong and take personal responsibility for ensuring the release of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe?
Prime Minister! I want to say, of course, that we work very hard to secure the release of Nazanin and all the dual nationals who are held, in my view, unfairly and illegally by the Iranian regime. It is time that an innocent woman was now released.
Robert Alford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Harlow, we are optimistic too that you're going to cut the cost of living for working people and invest in skills and apprenticeships, but we're particularly optimistic because yesterday you said we are going to have 20 new hospital upgrades. Can we be optimistic and make sure we get the new hospital in Harlow that we desperately need?
Well, look, Mr. Speaker, I think I better be careful here because we will be upgrading 20 new hospital upgrades will be upgraded, and details of the programme will be announced forthwith.
Martin Doxey Hughes.
I'm very grateful, Mr. Speaker. Incarcerated now for over 600 days with accusations of torture against the Indian state, Jagtar Singh Johal has now seen 2 Prime Ministers, 3 Foreign Secretaries and 4 Under-Secretaries, 1 suspended from their position. Therefore, can the Prime Minister assure my constituent, a UK national, that his government and their trade deals with the Indian state have his name at the top of the agenda, and that he seeks a meeting with the Foreign Secretary and myself with the Singh Johal family at the soonest opportunity?
I know that the Foreign Secretary will be taking up the case of Jagtar Singh Johal assiduously, as all previous Foreign Secretaries have done.
Raymond Chishti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much welcome the Prime Minister to his place and welcome his commitment to making religious freedom a key priority. With that being the case, and the campaign he supported on the backbenches on Asha Bibi, can you say, subject to Bishop Truro's report, cases like that will now be looked at differently by the United Kingdom?
I thank my honourable friend for the campaign he has managed for Asha Bibi and indeed others, and I think it's very important that our country should send out a very clear signal that we will provide a beacon for people facing such distress and such persecution.
Kate Green.
Further to the Prime Minister's answer to my honourable friend, the member for Ealing Central and Acton, will he also now commit his government to lifting the ban on asylum seekers working if the state takes more than 6 months to resolve their case?
Prime Minister.
The Home Office is currently reviewing that matter, and we will be making an announcement shortly.
Andrew Blower.
I was delighted that the Prime Minister, at the very earliest opportunity, spoke about adult care and changes are needed there. Can I commend to him particularly the Joint Select Committee report, which I took part in, which talks about insurance-type solutions as well as hypothecated taxes?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and I don't want to prejudge the outcome of what we're going to do, but we will be putting forward, Mr. Speaker, a detailed plan for how to deal with social care, and I hope it may attract cross-party support.
Thank you. Dr. Lisa Cameron.
Many thanks, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister look closely at reversing UK Government plans to close East Kilbride's Centre 1 tax office, causing the loss of thousands of jobs in my constituency, and be true to his word today that no town is ever again left behind?
Thank you, Ms. B. I will make sure that the Chancellor writes to her about that matter at the earliest opportunity.
Helen Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Single mums often come to my constituency when non-resident parents don't fulfil their duties. What's the Prime Minister's plan for tackling this problem?
We must work with our partners around the world to make sure that non-resident parents do fulfil their duties, and there are conventions, as the Honourable Lady knows, to insist on that.
Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to begin by thanking the new Prime Minister for all the good work that he is doing to make the case for Scottish independence. But for how long does the Prime Minister think he can honestly set his face against the right of the sovereign people of Scotland to decide their own future?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as far as I can remember, in 2014 the people of Scotland did have a referendum, and her side did not prevail. And the people of Scotland voted to remain part of the United Kingdom, from which there are many, many benefits. Many benefits, economic, political and geostrategic, and that is a great future for the people of Scotland, and one that I think will prevail.
David Hanson.
In order to inform the debate, could the Prime Minister tell the House what the level of tariffs are under World Trade Organisation rules for sheep, for planes and cars, which are the key industries in my constituency, which will be damaged by a no-deal Brexit?
Well, as the Honourable Gentleman knows full well, our intention is to make sure that there are no tariffs imposed, and that we leave with a zero tariff, zero quota outcome, which I'm sure he'd support.
John Woodcock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There was no mention of defence in his statement, still less of nuclear deterrence. So does he recognise that we are in a race against time to build the new dreadnought class of submarines to maintain continuous at-sea deterrence? And will he throw the whole weight of government behind that vital task?
I thank the honourable gentleman. I admire his commitment to a vital national asset that is, of course, made in his constituency, and I draw attention only to the real risk that is posed not just to the economy, but to the security of our country, if it should ever be governed by the party that he has rightly left.
One sentence of fewer than 30 words. Jack Dromey.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday 50 representatives of 2 million workers in manufacturing came to Parliament to detail their grave and growing concerns over the threat of a no-deal Brexit. They asked if the Prime Minister would meet with them so that the Prime Minister could hear first-hand just how serious that would be for them. Will the Prime Minister agree to do that?
I'm grateful, and I thank him for what he's doing to work with the manufacturing industry, and I give him my absolute assurance that we will do everything we can to protect just-in-time supply chains. And my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, as he may know, is now in charge of making those preparations. I'm sure he'll be only too happy to meet him and the representatives that he describes.
Matt Weston.
Speaker, the Prime Minister famously said F business in the context of Brexit. Does he not accept that communities such as mine depend on manufacturing such as JLR? By logical extension, does he mean F my community?
I think that people around this country will have heard me mention the JLR investment in Birmingham. I think 3 times already this morning. This afternoon, and it is a measure of the success of this country that it continues to attract such fantastic investments from JLR and indeed other car companies, and that is because we have cut corporation tax, whereas that party would put up corporation tax to the highest levels in Europe. That is the risk posed to JLR and many other businesses around the world.
Patrick Grady.
Speaker, of course, the United Kingdom that people in Scotland voted for in 2014 as a result of his Brexit obsession no longer exists. So can he confirm that he is both familiar with and supportive of the principles of the Claim of Right for Scotland?
Mr. Speaker, I refer the honourable gentleman the answer I gave several times already, which is the people of Scotland had a vote in 2014. They voted overwhelmingly to remain in the Union. They're absolutely right, and I see no reason to dissent from that view.
Alex Sibel.
Speaker, the Prime Minister mentioned aviation. In Norway, they have an aviation emissions plan, including making all short-haul flights electric by 2040, including R&D to achieve that. Does he have that scale of ambition?
He will have noticed that in my opening statement I mentioned electric planes.
Ian Paisley.
Mr. Speaker, in order to make the United Kingdom the home of electric vehicles, the Prime Minister will know that he will need to protect the intellectual property of those making those electric vehicles. Will he therefore step in and save the company Wrightbus that he is very familiar with and is receiving significant economic hardship at the present time? Will he make that a priority?
Well, I may say it was one of the great pities, in my view, that the current Mayor of London, not a patch on the old guy, decided to cancel a contract with Wrightbus of Ballymena, which was of great value to the people of this country, and I think it's a great company, and we will make sure, I can give the honourable my assurance, we will do everything we can to ensure the future of that great UK company.
Optimism is one thing, but pantomime is quite another. And what is the hottest day on record? It is astonishing that the Prime Minister seeks to outsource tackling climate change to the private sector. So can you tell us one thing his government's going to do in the next month to tackle the climate emergency?
Sorry, I'll tell you one thing that we are doing. We have secured for this country the COP26 for the UK. We will be hosting the World Climate Change Conference here in the UK, and leading the world once again, showing the world what UK technology, what UK technological optimism can achieve.
Tommy Shepherd.
Mr. Speaker, we know the Prime Minister is opposed to a second Scottish referendum. That is not my question. My question is, if the people who actually live in Scotland elect a Parliament in Edinburgh, and if by majority that Parliament votes to consult people on their constitutional future, will he respect that decision, yes or no?
I think, Mr. Speaker, it was common ground across all parties, including the Scottish Nationalists, at the referendum, that it was a once-in-a-generation decision that was taken in 2014, and that was the right answer.
Mohamed Yassin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Prime Minister's commitment to investment in the frontline healthcare. Bedford Hospital urgently needs funds in order to expand and meet the needs of our growing population. Will he give our hospital the money it needs?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We will, of course, make sure that the 20 billion extra that we have committed to the NHS goes to the front line, and we'll make sure that it goes to all hospitals in this country.
Gavin Shuker.
The central policy of his government now is to deliver Brexit in October, including through doing so without a deal, and as such it is unclear as to whether or not he commands a majority in this House. Will he now do what the Leader of the Opposition will not do, prove his own political virility, and table a vote of confidence for us to vote on when we return?
The House of Commons has voted several times to honour the mandate of the people. It is the law of this country that we leave the European Union on October the 31st, and that, I think, is what democracy requires and what we will do.
Long-suffering
Alan Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite his unionist bluster, he cannot deny his anti-Scottish sentiments which are on the record books. As a gesture going forward, will he at least find the money to repay the £160 million EU convergence uplift that was stolen from Scottish farmers by Westminster?
He will have seen, actually, that I have pledged to restore the money to Scottish farming if he'd been paying the slightest attention, and it is thanks to Conservatives in Scotland that we have done that.
Justin Madders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In his statement, the Prime Minister said he wanted to close the opportunity gap, but 2/3 of his cabinet were privately educated, which is more than double the composition of his predecessor's first cabinet. He's not leading by example, is he?
Mr. Speaker, I think what the people of this country want to know is what is the programme of this government to take this country forward. and I think the contrast is between a Conservative Party that is the party of the people, that wants to improve healthcare, that wants to invest in public services, and this party that would destroy the UK economy and ruin the livelihoods of everybody.
Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister says he wants to leave no town behind and unleash this nation's productive potential. If that's not just empty rhetoric, will the Prime Minister commit to saving the Kintycally Railway Works in my constituency, Springburn, due to close tomorrow? I want to have that constituency railway works reopened as quickly as possible. The Prime Minister form a task force across government to save it as quickly as possible.
As the Honourable Gentleman knows, business support is devolved in Scotland, and he should look to the government of Scotland, the incompetent government of Scotland, for his first port of call.
Oh, what an invidious choice. Mr. Peter Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The very limited guarantees contained in the EU Citizen Settled Status Scheme come nowhere near the promises the Prime Minister has previously made that no EU national will be any less favourably treated after we leave the EU. So will he now guarantee, as well as the Settled Status Scheme, will he guarantee the rights to healthcare, the pension rights, the rights to leave and return, the rights to bring the family over, the rights to vote, and all of the other rights currently enjoyed by citizens of the EU? Or does he need to get permission from his Chancellor, the Exchequer, before he answers that question?
Those assurances, those guarantees, as he knows, we are giving unilaterally in a supererogatory way. And, of course, I want to see them, as my honourable friend has suggested, I want to see a symmetrical response from the other side of the Channel, but I think we should be very proud of the steps we're taking.
Stephen Gittins.
Mr. Speaker, this session has underlined what my constituents believe, that the Prime Minister doesn't have a clue what he's doing. So will he tell us how he responded to the Fife packaging company who had to write to him to tell him that the Kipper packaging's rules are made in Westminster and have got nothing to do with the EU?
I think it really is extraordinary that the Scottish Nationalist Party is returning to the issue of fish, Mr. Speaker, when it is now clear that their whole policy is not just to join the euro, not just to submit to the whole panoply of EU regulations, but to hand over control of Scottish fisheries, Arbroath, Smokies, Kippers and all to the EU. That's their policy, and I would like to see them try and get elected on it.
Order. I thank the Prime Minister most warmly on his debut outing at the dispatch box for his answers and for his patience and courtesy and for responding to, in view of the chuntering from a secretary position by way of heckle, for responding to 129 inquisitors. Before we proceed with the next business, thank you, Prime Minister. Let me just say this. Yes, I'll come to points of order, of course. Following the appointment of the Right Honourable Lady, the member for Loughborough, to the Cabinet, I am expecting there to be a vacancy for the chair of the Treasury Select Committee, a matter to which, if memory serves me correctly, the Honourable Gentleman, the member for Wickham, referred much earlier in our proceedings. I shall announce the arrangements for the election to this post alongside any further Select Committee chair elections that may arise when the House returns in September. I hope that it will be possible to hold the election